And good evening, and good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be in the world. This is Griffin Gaming RPG, and welcome back to the Soul Citizens. And man, we have got a show today. Today, we have an illustrious group of people once again, including a illustrious special guest. And we will introduce him first. He's the minority in the group today, so we'll introduce him. Erris from Relay SC. Erris, thanks for coming back again. This is your second time on the show.
It is. I'm happy to be back. Thanks for having me back. It was a good time last time, and I expect it'll be the same this time.
Well, you get bragging rights now because you can tell Paul Shelley and you can tell a whole bunch of other people that you've been here more than them. So you've got to make sure you keep the 1 point lead on anybody else that comes on the show. Okay.
I will do anything it takes to stay 1 point ahead of Paul, the Astro Pub Shelley. Anything.
Awesome, awesome. And let's see. After that, we've got Colossal, the man who got a camera a couple of months ago. And y'all not just hearing that deep voice of his now, but you can see him in all his illustrious glory. Is that your what do we call those caps? What do you call those caps? Your on your head? What do we call those? Do rag.
Uh,
Is that your do rag?
do-rag. It is. I don't wear do-rag,
Is that a
sir.
do rag?
It's my claim to fame hat,
Is
but
that
it's
what
all
it
right.
is? Okay.
No,
We'll
it's
see.
good to be here. Glad to be a part of the show. I appreciate being a part of it. It's always good being a part of the show.
Yeah.
It's my second time with Erris being a part of the show. It was great last time, so I hope to continue that on.
Mhm.
And then Kimmy, always good to see Kimmy. So
Yeah.
it's always good to be on the show, and I'm glad I can fill in whatever role I can fill in.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what you're talking about role because you are technically a sole citizen. So you just didn't have a
Yeah, of
camera
course,
before, but you own you I mean, you're on the team at this point. So, call it what it is. Unless you tell me otherwise. So
paid for,
okay.
paid for by the citizens.
Paid for by the citizens. All right. And last but not least, the professor himself, Kimmy 65. Always decked out to the nines. What's happening, Kimmy?
Oh, good evening, guys. This is the way.
Good evening,
Oh,
guys. How you doing?
I love it. I love it. I
Hey, it's
wonder.
This
this
is the
I've
way.
heard that somewhere before. Where have I heard that before?
Mandalorian.
Ah, yeah. Okay, okay.
I'm a little starstruck tonight, man. I'm with the heavy hitters tonight.
Oh, yeah. This is the
I
knowledge
hear a
base.
lot of Colossal. I see a lot of Erris on
Hmm.
Relay, and I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
nervous, man. I'm nervous.
Well, listen, we are happy to see everybody who's here. Fast Cart, Shipwreck, Erish, hello, and of course, Gaz, what's up, my buddy over far across the
That's called.
pond? Good to see you, buddy.
He's
We
up
really
early in the morning for him.
Yeah, he is up early in the morning. Listen, we appreciate you guys being on the show. We've got a show chocked full of good stuff today. Whenever we do these shows, I try to bring on the people who I feel can very intelligently and articulately talk about Star Citizen. And we try to even make our subjects based around the people who are on. So, of course, we have people in our group that start from people who've just been in the game for a year to people who've been in it since the original backing fundraiser of it in 2012. And so today, all three of these guys who are on here are guys who've been to CitizenCon. These guys have listened to the videos. They know this stuff. But we're going to take apart something today, and you guys already saw the theme of the show is building a dynamic universe revisited. Now, for those of you who remember at CitizenCon 2019, Tony Z had a platform where he spent an hour talking about the AI quantum. He introduced quantum to us. And it's interesting too, by the way, because Eris, I heard Nakara say something the other day about what quantum was versus quanta. And I listened to the video again today, and this is what Tony Z said. He said quanta is the entire thing, and quantum are the individual things. Okay, because I kept going back and forth trying to name this show as a quantum, quanta, and I found out that both those names are used by Tony, and you'll hear him relay that later on. Uh, but before we get into that, I do want to touch on something, and I want to give these guys something that y'all can hold them accountable to. Okay, I asked them before the show to give consideration. As you guys know, we're getting ready to go into October. And as you also know, October is anniversary month for CIG. We're not doing CitizenCon. All these guys would have been at CitizenCon, including me. And I want to put this out to you guys who are watching the show too. Here's the question, and feel free to put it in chat. If there's something you think that's going to happen this year for the anniversary month, whatever you think it may be, what do you think it will be? If it's a ship sale, if it's some new tech, if it's something that's going to get introduced into the game, put it out there right now. I'm going to start with our guest, Erris. Okay, if there's something you think CIG will reveal in October, where's your money right now? What do you think?
Honestly, no, that's really difficult. It's been a strange year. Like they always try to bring something big out for CitizenCon, right? Last year we got the jump point, and actually seeing another that was huge, right? What are they going to do this year? They had a plan. They had something planned. It's changed, and I think what they show off is going to depend entirely on how they do this. I've been really wondering if they're going to take advantage of this and spin it so that they're going to have another inverse event, sort of like they've done with some of the ship sales and some of the like the Fleet Week sort of things. I'm wondering if they're going to do something like that, something inverse, and then show us something there. But all I want from CitizenCon, all I want from whatever format it takes, is more of what they've been doing the past 2 years of panels, right? Tony Z talking for an hour, Sean Tracy talking for an hour. I just want that. Just give me all of that on YouTube that I can watch it, and just that's all I want. That's all I ask.
Okay, well, Gaz put a prediction in the screen, and I think his prediction is 100% accurate. He says they're going to get more money out of us that month. That's what he says, okay? That's what he says is going to happen. I don't think there's anything that could be off on that particular one. Kelosal?
Yes, they are. You better they have 2 ships ready for me because I'm coming.
Yeah.
So I do think, or at least I hope, that they put out these wonderful things. First of all, they may put out, I hope they put out something on Terra and Pyro. It'd be nice if they gave me a concept, something new on the Merchantman. It'd be nice if they did that. I mean, because we don't know what's going on with the Merchant. We don't know if they scrapped the concept, got creating something new. Don't know. So it'd be nice if I saw at least some type of sneak peek, maybe something that's at least 2 pictures of the Merchant, maybe an exterior and an interior. But I am really firmly looking for, because I was hoping that this was going to happen with E3, and then COVID hit and it just screwed up everything. I'm hoping for some type of release date of Squadron 42. Maybe something that says
That's
beta,
a
because
stretch.
they said
Beta. Okay, beta
about that
maybe
in
beta.
2018.
Yeah, maybe beta, but ooh.
Did they say something about that at the CitizenCon 2018? They sat there and said this is going to happen, this is going to happen. So
Erris is shaking his head, man. He's
I'm looking for something beta, or I'm still with the British say beta. Something.
Okay. All right. Well, that's your prediction. You're entitled to your prediction. We'll give you the room for that.
I'm looking at Gaz on that one.
Okay. All right, Kimmy. Let's hear it. What's it gonna be?
Well, I'm gonna use the baseball adage. I'm not coming with the fastball, and the obvious answer would be Pyro. But I'm gonna throw a curveball. I'm gonna throw a curveball, unexpected pitch. I'm gonna say they're gonna finish out Stanton. We're gonna get Crusader end of year, where we actually see the love letter to Bespin, the Cloud City. Them actually, as they were talking about the cloud tech a lot, and we've been seeing a lot of that being added in. If you look at Loreville, you're seeing a lot of the cloud tech that's in, and they're making strides in the cloud tech. Now, that's one of the things they need, one of the main components they need to create a gas giant. So with that said, that's a curveball for me, the unexpected thing, because we're all set on the Squadron 42 Pyro, and we're looking down the road. But it would be really cool for them to finish out Crusader and have Stanton working and the location of Crusader. and probably the Hercules and the the Garden City there as well.
Nice, nice. I'm gonna kind of bounce off of springboard off of what Kimmy just said. I don't. There's so many things that could happen. I agree. Some work toward the completion of Stanton, Pyro, definitely something with that. But I'm gonna go with the area of what they're gonna sell, the old money piece. Um, and I'm gonna say this based on a few things. The big thing that I'm gonna say is that we've seen this shifting, moving from mining to this cargo docking thing. So I would love to see the Starlifter. I would love to see the Hull C, whether working or not doesn't make a difference, or the Nautilus. Any of those three. Any of those three for a sale. Now, here's the question. Will they drop something we're not expecting? Because if you remember, they did that with the Valkyrie, and nobody expected the Valkyrie. Came out of nowhere. And we've heard them say that they've got ships that they have not released that are good to go. Do you think that they'll drop some surprise ship that nobody's expecting, or do you think it'll be something that we've gotten concept and we know is coming down the road? And then we're going to jump into the show. Oh, Gas hit the other one. Thank you, Gas, because I completely forgot about that. Because the Taurus, and we talked about this already, the Taurus is on the screens in Evocati right now. You can't bring one up, but it's there. So the Taurus, Taurus. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Gas. Thank you for that. So what do you guys think? They're going to brand new ship or something we've seen already? You think they're going to drop something on a surprise, a career surprise we don't expect? Go ahead, Erris.
I'm trying to find a reference to something that I just remembered.
Okay, keep looking.
I'm going to keep looking. The one thing that I actually hope that they drop for CitizenCon this year is Theaters of War. We still haven't got it. But interestingly enough, so the entire subject of this show today, building a dynamic universe, talking about quantum and Quanta and all that, we did get an interesting tidbit. I think it was this week or last week, sometime really, really recently. We had thought that Quanta and Quantum would require server meshing and iCache. Apparently it doesn't.
And hold a thought, because we're going to hit that afterward.
Okay.
That was in the Chris Roberts post. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. You're absolutely right.
but like that's my thought.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't require all that other stuff that we thought it would. That's my.
Because we did think it was dependent upon that. You're right. Absolutely. Wow.
But they've been showing so much cargo stuff. Like they've hyping up cargo, and look at these cargo bays, look at these cargo ships, and look at this cargo. Okay.
Yeah. That's a good point. Very good point. Okay. Kelosal, new ship or concept ship or no?
I mean, I don't know about a concept ship. They may bring out the Taurus. The signs are there. I mean, if the Taurus is in Evocati, then that would be a good sign for that.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of people would chime in for that. Hercules. I mean, we even heard them say something about that. I think they said something about that in this recent Star Citizen video that you just put out. But I
mean, we've seen interiors on the C2. We've seen the interiors on the Hercules.
Yeah, you may see it. You may see it come out. I mean, you may see those two ships come out: the Hercules, the Taurus, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Star Runner slipped its way through.
Oh, okay, yeah, actually gets released. Yeah, instead of 312, they dropped because they said it was going to be latter part of 311. Later.
Yeah, I know.
So they
could. Would that be a joy if they slip that in right at the end of the presentation and say, "Oh, by the way, we're ready to go. Here you go."
You can buy it. It's live right now, flight ready. Yeah. Kimmy, thoughts? Ships?
I'm thinking to put a bow on this. All the things that we're thinking that's going to happen, and the fact that cargo is going to be much bigger deal than what we think it is. But a lot of us are looking at the cargo stations and it's just like, okay, yeah, we're going to put cargo there. But when we talk, what we were just talking about, adding in these rudimentary things like Pyro and another location, possibly Crusader itself, then you're talking about the advent of being able to run cargo to these locations, and then you will kind of see a rudimentary emergence of the economy system, because now you're talking about being able to push and move cargo around to these different areas. So I would not be surprised to see a new type of cargo ship, whether it's not just the Taurus to throw, that's the side piece, but to introduce a new type of cargo ship along with the other concept, like the Hercules itself being docked and set in the area of Crusader, but another new cargo ship that could really start pushing cargo around. So then Tony Z can really get a handle on, okay, here's the cargo, and then here's a rudimentary process of the Quanta or quantum system.
Okay.
So yeah, I kind of see them throwing in that one concept ship to say, guys, gals, cargo is the backbone of the economy. So we're going to really surprise you here, and you're going to see how it starts to work.
That's a good point, because from last year, one of the ships that got voted on was a Xi'an cargo ship, and we have heard nothing about it since then. So, Kimmy, you might be right. That would be a surprise drop, because they had told us then they were working on that. That and the Refinery are the two ships that we haven't seen yet from 2019. So that's a very good point. Mad Wolf, thank you for the follow. Frax, thank you for the follow. And Table of Horror,
guys.
Shiver, thank you for following as
Shiver.
always. All right, thank you.
Kusanagi is saying the Kraken.
Hey, you know what? I was gonna say, Admiral, you are really being ambitious. That is serious.
Shooting for the moon.
Hey,
there,
listen,
buddy.
you talk about,
but it's okay. That's passion.
You talk about keep hope alive. Holy smoke! All right,
No,
but you know what?
Pure passion.
You know what? Yeah,
07
flames
Admiral.
over the place. Was it flames?
Flames
all over the
place.
place. All over the place. Thank you for the follow. All right, Admiral. Tons of cargo there. You're right. Plenty of cargo, boy, and a lot of space too. I will say this: that Kraken looked really good sitting on the platform down at, is it Hurston? Remember when you first came in, it was sitting down. Remember, you used to be able to look out the window and see the Kraken? I don't know if you guys remember that. They took it out of there, but that was awesome. Thank you for the bits, Docs. We really appreciate that. 300 bits. Holy smoly. Thank you so much. Okay. You guys have heard our predictions. If we are right, you guys can applaud us. If we're wrong, you can talk about us later. Go ahead. What are you going to say, Kelosal?
I just want to respond to Table of Horrors, because he said that he hoped that, he talked about they could be changing things with Theaters of War, and that he hasn't heard anything about it in over a year. It's not really true, because they did put out something to Evocati earlier this year on that one for testing. So I don't know what is going to be, the update on that one, but they did put out something for Evocati to test early this year, at least a couple of times. They did a couple of run-throughs with that. So when they do get it out to you, I think you'll be satisfied. I really hope so.
Yes, but I've tried feeding my son avocados. Trying to feed him avocados makes him throw up, which nobody likes avocados. Therefore,
you better make guacamole. Maybe he'll like guacamole instead of just doing avocados.
Maybe. Yeah, I think I should move on to that.
Think of it that way. Maybe
Put them on chips.
Chips. Erris, I see your message there, and that's interesting that you would say that, because we didn't even think about that. And people have often said, how come they haven't put a whole A or B out? I mean, they're smaller ships. Why haven't they done that? And that would be a big surprise if they introduced an element of the Hull series out of nowhere.
Yes.
I mean, the Hull A is a small ship. Boom. That
so
whole B carries a lot of stuff. We know they got to get that whole mechanism for getting the cargo together, but still, you're absolutely right. That whole series would be a nice introduction that nobody was really expecting. All right. Okay, well, listen, guys, we're going to get into it, because this is about an hour-long presentation. We may stop the presentation if any of our illustrious guests and hosts tonight want to talk about something, but we're going to try to follow along. Y'all know how Tony Z is. Tony Z gets deep. He says that he begins this presentation kind of going over material that he started in earlier, so bear with it. But believe me, if you didn't see this, once he gets to the meat of it, you're going to gobble it up. There's really good stuff here. So let's go ahead and jump in with Tony Z.
One special note with Tony Z, he was going to pursue his degree in economics before Chris stopped him and recruited him.
So he's kind of still doing his love.
This
but
is
doing it to
simulation.
Star Citizen. Right. That's a good point.
get those lights brighter. Okay, so hi, I'm Tony Zurovec, and I'm the Director of Persistent Universe for Star Citizen. I'll be doing the lead vocals tonight, and over here on my right on the keyboard is Jake Mealy, our economy designer from Austin.
Hi.
And we're going to be showing you something pretty interesting tonight, and I want to make sure to call out our guitar and bass players back in Montreal, Martin and Robert Lizy.
Yeah, that's right.
They spent a lot of time working with us over the last, 4, 5, 6 months, very, very intensely on what we're going to be revealing tonight. It's been a bit of a stealth project recently. We've actually shown it to very few people within Cloud Imperium because we wanted to get it to a level of maturity to where it was very easy for people to understand
Thank you for the follow.
what the benefits of this new technology were going to be. And I'm going to give you a glimpse of it tonight. But you're going to need some background information to truly
Or the
appreciate
host
it.
table
So
for
bear
us.
with
Thank
me
you.
for a bit, and you'll see why we consider it a quantum leap. So, as everybody here obviously knows, Star Citizen is a very ambitious project. Our goal is to deliver a variety of incredibly detailed solar systems that behave in logical fashion and to then give you ample freedom to follow your interests, whatever they may be. Thus far, we've been focused entirely on a single system, Stanton, which includes 4 planets, 12 moons, 225 economic nodes, 44 trading outposts, 13 rest stops, and 50 asteroid fields. So yeah, it's really big. The point of this presentation then is to give you a better understanding of how, when the first one's taken so long, we're aiming to kick things into overdrive so that we can deliver new systems much more quickly. This involves, obviously, a lot of different areas: procedural generation of terrain, modular art sets, algorithmic detailing of buildings and interiors, and a lot of other stuff. For the purposes of this talk, though, I'm going to focus on what I call the dynamic content. So, what is dynamic content? Dynamic content responds to player and NPC actions in logical fashion. It's systemic. This means that the universe is in constant motion, which makes it a far more interesting place to explore. Most missions should, of course, be dynamic in nature. They should only be offered when there's an actual need for something. This might take the form of a factory that needs some aluminum to create a retail product, a criminal that needs to be brought to justice, or someone that needs a lift from one location to another. At their core, missions are services provided by one party for the benefit of another, and they are therefore one of the fundamental ways by which imbalances in the economy can be addressed. Likewise, economic nodes, which include things like refineries, factories, and retail shops, need to be dynamic since they must continually take into account the various market forces and adjust accordingly. When demand for something outstrips supply, whether it's iron ore, bullets, or ship repairs, you expect prices to rise. And conversely, when there's an excess of something, you expect that prices will fall. There's more to it, of course. Concepts like marginal demand and price discovery require a fair bit of math. But in the end, it's all about the constant search for equilibrium as production and consumption levels vary. I'll get around to explaining probability volumes in more detail in a bit, but suffice to say for now that they dictate what you encounter as you travel through a given area. As such, they should definitely be dynamic. So, for example, if a new field of asteroids rich in valuable commodities is discovered, you'd expect to find a lot of NPC miners in the area, but as the resources are gradually depleted, their numbers should start to fall off. Pirates should gravitate toward areas with a lot of value to plunder and recoil as the amount of security ticks up. So let's look into each of these areas in a bit more detail and see why we've struggled to set up a single solar system and at the same time get a precise understanding of what needs to happen so that we can start moving a lot faster. We'll start with the missions. A Star Citizen mission is fundamentally just a container for code and data, similar in concept to a class in any of a multitude of modern-day programming languages. Inputs can be passed into a mission from either the runtime environment or services to allow for customization. This allows designers to do things like, say, inject the type and quantity of cargo, whether the ship should be damaged or not, and where the ship should be heading, into a generic transport scenario so that we can reuse the same.
I want to stop for a second and address an issue that Frax just asked. And I've heard other people ask this, and I want to make sure you guys understand. When he talks about a trade route, we're talking about a route that is basically, for example, if I were to say I wanted to go from Port Olisar to, let's say, Delamar, or let's say Hurston. I could take a straight route if I want to. And for those of you who played Eve, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say this. Just because that's the route, it doesn't mean that's the route you have to take. It may be the quickest route. And this is where the trade-off is. If you take the quickest route, the pirates are aware of the quickest route. And so they may set up to intercept you in that route. What you would do is you would basically set waypoints to take crazy routes to get somewhere. Now, it takes you more time, puts more wear on your ship, uses more fuel, but you have a better chance of arriving safely at a location. So, but trade routes, just like a highway, for example, just kind of look at it as if you could take the highway or you could take side roads. If you take side roads, it's going to take you more time. You may have to, have the bumpy route or whatever the case may be. You may have to cut through an asteroid belt, whatever it is. So you're not locked into those routes, but most people will take a trade route just because they feel it's a safe way to go, and it's fast when you're trying to deliver. So you're not restricted to that trade route. So we want to make sure that people know that. But most people will take routes until they get used to figuring out different ways to navigate. Okay, so hopefully
Hey,
that
Griff,
helps.
I want to jump in too.
Sure, go ahead, buddy.
I want to use nature as an analogy. You ever see those school of fish or sardines in that one track, and it's a bunch of them, and you have maybe a seal that comes in and he's picking one out of the bunch, but yet the school is still moving.
Mm-hmm.
So in that context, you're going to get into the school of that route with the other missed hulls, the other ships that are running. And so if there's trouble, you're like, okay, let me haul ass. But you might see that other person get pirated, but you can keep moving. So in that, in numbers, there's power in numbers. And you look at it as, well, it was that person's time to go. But that route, you're going to have a school of fish going from point A to point B, basically. And so you can get in the middle. So the outer edges are picked by the pirate. So keep it in that context as well. These trading routes is going to be heavily populated, but at the same time, you're going to have people that you can hire, whether they're NPCs or real people, as a security. What is it?
Security detail.
To work
Escort.
with you.
Escort. Mm-hmm.
Escort. Mm-hmm. So you have a dynamic that you can, risk, reward, and if you're able to afford this stuff. So you're going to take those risks based on how much you have.
Yeah.
So a lot of things to think about with that.
Yep. So
it's also
go ahead, Erris.
It's also going to depend a lot on the system that you're working in. Right now, we've only got one system, so it's not great. But once we've got more systems, there will be high security systems and low security systems. And in some of the higher security systems, those common trade routes are also going to be heavily watched by the UEE or whatever local security forces, right? So you might actually be safer on the regular trade route. But there might be some stuff, there might be an asteroid field off the regular trade route that has more value. And the entire game is going to be a balance of risk to reward. And basically what Tony ends up talking about in this is a lot of if there's a lot of reward somewhere, well, people are going to start gravitating to that reward, which means the risk is going to go high. But then as the pirates show up, then more security will show up, which means the risk will balance, but then the reward will balance, and it's just
that's what he calls dynamic. That's the whole thing of using that term dynamic. That's because it's constantly fluctuating. You may do really well going to this particular planet, and a month from now, it's drained out. No more. You got to find some new place to go. So it'll be constantly. That's what he says. Dynamic. It's constantly a living universe. It's constantly changing. Though, remember we always talk about how CIG doesn't put stuff in the game just for decoration. When you guys can go into those trade areas where you see those monitors that look like stock market things, that stuff's there for a reason, because it's going to be live. That data is going to tell you what's the best place to trade this, what's this. So even though that stuff right now is a placeholder, it's all going to mean something as we get deeper into it.
And interestingly enough, that data might not even be live. That data might have to be brought by data runners.
Yes. Woohoo.
And then things start getting interesting.
Harold.
Right.
Yeah, Harold and Mercury. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, you got to
framework for a
gotta
lot of
search
different
for that
situations.
material out there.
Missions can
commodity.
have content tags embedded within themselves to denote their composition, whether they contain security, pirates, freighters, miners, asteroids, or some kind of a combination. Missions can also have thematic tags applied. These don't specify physical content, but rather detail the headline story behind the scenario that a designer created. So designers can differentiate between a straightforward pirate encounter versus one that includes an ambush. Once these descriptors have been assigned, the missions are injected into a database that other systems can access so that they can be instantiated and customized depending upon the situation. This, however, is where we start to run into some major problems. Designers have to explicitly link missions to various constructs within the game, an NPC mission giver, for example, or a probability volume covering the area around yellow. This is time-consuming and greatly complicates maintenance. If a content tag, like pirate, is split into subtags like Pirate Light and Pirate Heavy so that we can have more control over what we're aiming to instantiate, you have to go to every place you had assigned the original mission category and individually determine which of the new ones should be enabled. Worse, this isn't dynamic at all. Mission content is fixed to specific NPCs and locations, so there's no evolution. The universe is completely static. Another major problem is that we don't have sufficient context to properly customize the missions. At a macro level, the game doesn't really understand the concept of a route, much less what miners traversing that route should be carrying, or what condition they should be in, or which direction they should be if if they're empty, heading towards a mine, or full, bringing the results of their efforts back to a refinery. This lack of context means that we can't exploit a mission's ability to have information injected into it for customization, and that means that you see a lot less diversity, despite requiring just as much work. The last problem, and it's a big one, is that there's no NPC regulation of the mission content. Missions are the basic units of work for the economy, and if someone doesn't do what needs to be done, then everything grinds to a halt. In a properly functioning system, NPCs need the ability to step up, if players aren't going to, and the risk reward justifies the effort, and do the work themselves. If a commodity can be purchased at one location and sold at another for a dramatic markup, and there isn't enough cost or risk involved in the transport to warrant the differential, NPCs should seize the opportunity and move the material themselves until the price starts to make sense. So let's talk about economic nodes now. An economic node is an entity within the game which might be represented via an actual storefront, a kiosk, a UI interface, or an NPC that possesses an item manifest detailing the items it wants to buy or sell, storage capacity, and a fair bit of data related to determining prices. This includes refineries that process ore, factories that produce goods, and retail stores where you buy finished products. Factory inputs aren't explicitly denoted, but are instead derived from the production formulae of whatever they manufacture. Prices, what economic nodes are willing to pay for their inputs, and what they want in order to sell, are determined algorithmically based upon the rate of change of their inventory versus the tangent of a pricing curve. This means that they're smart enough to, say, raise the price of what they're selling even when their inventory is low if they detect that they're being resupplied at a sufficient rate to get where they want to be in a reasonable amount of time. So clearly there's some dynamism happening here, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, that's where the good news ends. As with missions, economic nodes don't have any real context in terms of supply and demand, and there's no systemic flow of goods throughout the economy. Why does a refinery want ore? Why is an NPC willing to buy some drugs from you? Where does the shop get the goods that it's selling? Right now, the answer to all these questions is the same. We fake it. Economic nodes conjure up their own supply and demand out of thin air. If a node is designated as wanting to purchase a particular item, for example, designers dictate a formula that describes how that inventory will be gradually burned off so that they want more. These products you deliver to a node then, they don't actually go anywhere. There's no real demand. This is impossible to balance because while production and consumption are fixed, the player count isn't. Sometimes 100 players are interacting with an economic node, and sometimes none. And I mention this because behind the scenes, at the economic level, all of the players, despite being on different servers, really are connected to one single system. A real economy is a tangled web of dependencies, and you can't expect logical results when its gears can completely seize up due to the action or inaction of players. What we really need then is NPC regulation of the system, for NPCs to purchase items when they need them, thus keeping the demand side logical, while stepping in to help with the supply when players don't and the risk reward warrants it. This has ripple effects into other areas. If the demand for missiles spiked because there was a lot of combat, you'd expect that the commodities used to construct those missiles would start to rise in price. And you'd also expect to see more miners and freighters working to alleviate that shortage. If the price got high enough that those transports would be carrying a lot of value, so you'd expect piracy to increase, at which point you should start to see a lot more security patrols and requests for combat escorts. A simple change in demand then should be able to alter not only what you
Griff.
see as you travel throughout the
All right, if I
system,
hop
but
in for a
also the
second?
available missions. These kinds of knock-on effects.
Have at it.
So one thing that's interesting when they're talking about this, and one thing that I think will be interesting to see how they implement it, is how they're talking about how right now production consumption are faked, right? And one of the things they really want to do is to get away from that faking of it. But even when they implement it, unless we've got multiple systems, there's a lot that's going to have to be faked anyway, because there's nowhere right now to manufacture missiles, right? We don't have places in game for manufacturing all these things. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fake the sending material out and then bringing supplies in.
Yeah.
You make a good point, Erris, because essentially you do need to have different areas to support the different layers of quanta or quantum as we see it, because it's not just the economy system, but it's the materials that change in value based upon the supply and demand, and the fact that it's not just about, you're going to this one place to take this and go there. It's about monitoring what the materials are worth, and they change dynamically right before your eyes. And so based upon whether it's being reactive to the system is driving what we do, where we go. And basically you have no choice but to react to it, because at the end of the day, it's about your bottom line. So if you're low on UEC, United Earth credits, you got to get your butt out the hangar and get to that place to make your money. And at the same time, you're in competition with the 90% of NPCs who are saying, I got to get out and make a living, and I need to find this. And so you're going to find yourself to these outskirts of the verse, because it's where other people are not. And you have to figure out what is it out there, and you have to bring it back and bring that valuable material back.
That's a good
And
point.
so the system is going to react to that as well. Reaction and reactive.
That's a very good point, because Tony's alluded to that earlier, where he talked about the fact that even the NPCs will respond to demand. And I think a lot of times when we think about NPCs based on other games, we're just used to NPCs being just basically mannequins, right? They're just walking around trying to make the place look alive. But he's saying that mannequins in this game will actually be taking orders, mission orders. They'll be picking up and delivering. So maybe you've got some great trade route, right? And you're hitting it, and then you keep coming back and realizing, hey, I'm noticing that the value's changing here. And maybe that's not because of players doing it, but because NPCs are also taking advantage of that route as well. So you're right, Kenny. There's going to be this constant dynamic movement that's happening when it's not contingent upon real players. The NPCs, that live universe, can be just as much. When we're in bed sleep, the NPCs are still impacting the universe, which is pretty deep stuff. It's pretty deep stuff. Okay, here we go.
It's also good because it's a player and NPC run economy rather than just a player run economy, which you'll see in a lot of MMOs, and especially in something like World of Warcraft, the economy runs for a while, but then it gets top heavy, and then it becomes really hard to start out in the economy because, well, I can't buy this thing I need because no one manufactures it anymore because everyone's level 90 or whatever, right? So it's it should end up a more balanced economy. 10 years from
that you mentioned, Erris. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, good stuff. Okay, here we go.
In fact, should happen regardless of whether any player is in an
point,
area,
Scott.
and that's a separate problem I'll talk about more when we get to probability volumes. So let's take a quick look at what it means to set up an economic node. As I mentioned, there are about 225 economic nodes within the Stanton system, and many of them deal with a lot of different items. Each of these items can specify its own production or consumption formula, along with a lot of
Oh
other
my God,
information,
uber nerd.
space, optimal
Wow.
activity level, price,
With
offset,
120
All right, that deserves a pause. Uber Nerd, thank you so much for the raid of 120 folks. Oh, wow. Jay Calvin,
Jay
thank you
Calvin,
for the follow.
thanks for the
Thank
follow.
you, thank you. We really appreciate you guys. All you Uber Nerd folks, we are doing a revisiting of Tony Z's very detailed and interesting speech on Quanta and quantum and the economy. So if you've seen it, you know exactly what we're doing. Drag on the Elder, thank you for the follow. You guys are more than welcome to join us. We really appreciate you guys being here with us. Uber Nerd, I hope you had a good night tonight. I'm sure you all guys always have fun over there. Thank you very much. TGYLL, I don't know how to say that. Tgulo. Hi, we
Tiger.
appreciate the follow. We appreciate the follow. All right, we're going to fire it back up again.
This information can be archetyped, but of course the world's a lot more interesting if every economic node is a bit different. So there's still a lot of customization that winds up happening. So now let's take a look at the economic nodes around a typical planetary system.
Ooh, we got to see that Uber Nerd. I know you've been monkeying around in
Finally,
DU
let's
for a
take
bit
look at
now.
the economic nodes around the entire Stanton solar system.
TLC,
That's a
PJW,
tremendous
thank
amount
you
of
for the
data
follow.
to set up and maintain as we're routinely adding new items and changing prices. And the worst part is that it's all extremely rigid. There's no way to have an economic node increase how much of something it produces or consumes because those things are attached to formulae that have no understanding of external events. So right now, designers try their best to brute force this stuff, to make it feel like it's a systemic world, even if it's not. If an area is configured to have a lot of pirates, they increase the price offsets and demand for goods at nearby nodes. If the number of pirates is subsequently decreased, or maybe more security is added to the area, then the nodes are updated to reflect that fact. It's a ton of work, and while this sort of hand tweaking does yield something that feels vaguely logical, if static, it's definitely not a real solution, and it doesn't even begin to address the major problems. Now we come to the last of the major areas for which I wanted to illustrate the problems that we currently face. So, what is a probability volume? A probability volume is an area of space that contains information detailing what you should see as you pass through the area. It's an optimization of sorts in that it allows us to achieve a desired effect, a certain number of pirates in an area or a particular likelihood of encountering a freighter filled with iron ore, without having to burn a lot of computational horsepower simulating things when there are no players around to see it. This is accomplished via linking mission content tags to probability curves that span all or part of the expanse of the volume. So for example, you can denote that security ships are commonplace near Port Olisar and gradually fall off over a couple hundred kilometers, whereas it's very rare to see pirates who would prefer to avoid security close to Port Olisar, but more likely to see them as you get farther away. There are quite a few different types of curves denoting, because until a player actually accepts one of these missions and heads to that location, there are a variety of probabilities. I think some of our notes got screwed up here. Anyway, so one of the more interesting types of curves is the spoofing curve, which allows missions to skirt the normal rules, requiring that they can only be created in the proximity of a player. And this is done so that an NPC can request that you travel to them to provide something they desire, in which case, obviously, we can't limit them to only existing in yours or another player's immediate proximity. This is how combat assist is currently handled, and we'll be adding some other things like NPC refuel and NPC passenger transport in the near future. The reason it's called spoofing is because we only keep a small stub active on the back end, which is way more efficient. We've got other types of curves. There are reinforcement curves that allow designers to dictate how quickly backup tends to arrive when you've been identified as a felon. And we also have the ability to modulate that time according to how far away you are from the place you were last spotted and how long ago that was. There are bounty hunter curves, which allow us to link to a probability, which allow us to link a probability to your wanted level so that we can increase the encounter frequency when they'd actually be hunting you and otherwise keep them very rare. Let's continue on, though, and get a better understanding of how exactly probability volumes works. Here we have an area of space that's marked up as having a certain probability of pirates and freighters, security, asteroids, and derelict ships. Now let's go ahead and activate all of that content. That's a lot of content to simulate when no one is around to see it. A lot of pathfinding NPCs, animations, vehicle physics, collision detection. Now let's go ahead and introduce a player and clear the board. Those pirates and freighters and everything else, they still exist, but only in a probabilistic state. As the player traverses through the volume, we roll the dice on the various curves and force the probabilities to make a choice. Does that content exist at that location or doesn't it? Here, the player gets a hit from the asteroid probability. So the mission databases in query define missions with the associated content tag, dynamic parameters injected, and the mission is instantiated. And now a bit later, the player trips the freighter probability and then eventually runs into a pirate. The key point here is that much of the world exists as a superposition of probabilities until a player gets sufficiently close that the wave functions collapse, at which point we instantiate them and start simulating the full-blown entities. One of the quirks with probability volumes is that they usually represent a variety of low-frequency events. Space is big after all, and even in a pretty heavily populated area, you shouldn't be running into other ships all that often. The problem is that the likelihood of multiple events happening simultaneously is a product of their probabilities, meaning that it's very unlikely you'd ever see two or more at the same time. So let's go ahead and see what this means in practice. Here's a player traversing a probability volume. He makes it through a good part of it before the freighter's probability curve determines that an encounter has occurred, at which point the probability volume queries the mission database with the freighter tag and instantiates a compatible mission. The player continues on, and shortly thereafter, the pirate's probability curve indicates a hit, which triggers another lookup into the mission database. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with this. In fact, it's a pretty accurate representation of what you realistically expect to see. Two rare events happening on their own schedule. The systemic behavior of the freighter and the pirate, even if spawned separately, would allow them to logically react to one another. So if they were spawned in close enough proximity, the pirate might even attack the freighter. The problem is that this approach lets the algorithms dictate too much of the experience, and if you're not careful, this can lead to the gameplay starting to feel very formulaic. What we really want is the ability for designers to craft more custom content and to then have a mechanism by which we can trigger it such that it all feels logical, if a bit lucky in the timing. So what we do instead of basically allowing the algorithms to entirely control what you see is we defer the activation for a short period of time and bend the probabilities of other things so that we're more likely to get a combination than would otherwise be the case. So they once again the player once again triggers the freighter's probability, but rather than, you already got it? Yeah, so we're running a little bit ahead. But basically what you've seen here is the player hit the freighter's probability, held on to it. We bent the probabilities to increase the likelihood of anything else being able to be attached. In this case, that involved the freighter. It involved the pirate, rather. So why does this matter? Think about a pirate and a freighter being created separately. It's going to take a good while for the pirate to close the distance with the freighter, disable it, park next to it, and board it. This means that you'd never come upon a situation where the freighter's already been disabled and the pirates are rampaging through the ship, so you'd better hurry if you want to save the crew. That's actually a really interesting scenario, though, one that'd be a lot of fun to experience. So while we're fine with the systemic functionality, driving things by default, we want to be able to bend things towards more interesting situations without it ever feeling too random every once in a while. The problem with probability volumes, then, all comes down to their construction. Each one, and there are lots of them, contains a litany of curves and associated data and is set up by hand, which is time-consuming and requires constant updating as other things change. One of the main reasons why they're so difficult to maintain is that many of the variables that a probability volume details should impact one another. More security in an area should of course impact the number of pirates, but because they're all handled independently, designers have to be very careful when modifying them. Mistakes are inevitably made, which results in a lot of sleuthing around to figure out what broke or is now poorly balanced and how to resolve it. The worst thing, though, is that they're static. If an area has a lot of pirates, it will always have a lot of pirates. There's nothing you or the NPC population can do to change that. Rewards won't vary based upon the level of threat in an area because the threat is always the same. A new commodity discovery won't cause miners to move in to exploit it, and won't in turn attract pirates eager to prey on them. Demand for security patrols and escorts for that area won't increase in response to the pirates, and the pirate threat won't recede as a result. What we really need then is a way to dynamically derive the probability curves based upon what's happening, or rather should be happening when we manage to resolve all these problems I've been pointing out across the solar system. So I've called out a lot of very serious problems, things that require enormous amounts of bandwidth to set up and maintain, and that still fail to deliver the experience we want. What we actually want is a dynamic, logical universe. We want the demand for goods and services to be the result of a legitimate economic need, and we must have sufficient runtime context so that we can customize these modular mission templates. NPCs must be able to contribute in helping to turn the gears of the economy from buying and selling goods to creating and accepting missions. The system needs to automatically balance itself so that we can focus on the high-level rules instead of the details. All of this, too, has to be incredibly computationally efficient, which means we need a more focused simulation engine, one that's only concerned with what we need to achieve the desired effect. If we're ever going to reach a point where we can deliver new solar systems in a reasonable amount of time, then we're going to need to make a quantum leap. So, what...
Okay, so I want to stop right there real quick.
You need the tech behind to support all of this.
Exactly, and I just kind of want to go back to something, Erris, you said earlier, and Tony uses this word scripting. I don't think people really get how much what you're doing in most games is all basically scripted, right? There are people who go in, they lay out certain probabilities of things that can happen to you in the game, and those things remain in place until at some point they decide to go back in and re-script it again and change it.
What feels broken.
Exactly, and what Tony is saying is they want to create a system that is actually on its own, making its own adjustments, improving itself, impacting itself, and responding to itself, so that you don't have a developer who's just coming in with okay, it's the third month in, we need to change this particular mission around. They want this thing so that it's actually driving itself. That's pretty ambitious. I don't know any game that's doing anything like that. Erris, you got some thoughts because you were shaking your head earlier.
Well, and when it comes down to this whole system, the most important thing is something that Tony actually just mentioned seconds before, is that they basically need this system to fill all of the systems. Mm-hmm. There are 100 planned systems in Star Citizen. Each one is massive. Each one has planets that are the size of an entire bloody planet. Like, the amount of space Star Citizen is stupid. It is honestly stupid. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And the only way that this game can work and not feel like, oh, I'm repeating this mission over and over and over. I've seen this exact same mission in 4 different systems, is if they come up with something that dynamically adjusts. And there's still going to be, like, designers are going to have to craft hundreds of different encounters, but being able to sort of scale those encounters and almost mix and match is the only way that they can make the game happen. Like, Quanta is so incredibly important to filling the game.
And Quanta is what makes us, Kimmy, you said this earlier, the Quanta is what makes us go venture out into space. Because without that economy and that dynamic going on, like you said, there's no reason to get off my couch. Because if we've just worked in Stanton and Stanton starts to exhaust in the area of resources and demand, well, guess what I've got to do? I've got to hit somebody's jump point and go someplace else to answer that and respond to it. So, Erris, to your point, and to his point, Tony's point, talking about other systems means nothing if there's no reason to drive us there and to create some type of, dynamo or dynamic that makes us want to travel through the universe, other than just to go blow up each other in ships. Obviously we want to have something more than that being the only reason why we want to venture, through several wormholes and get with our friends.
It goes back to Easter, right? What is it with Easter? What is that with the Easter eggs, right? you hide these Easter eggs in the yard, right? And the kids go out and try to find these Easter eggs, right? We can relate to that. And once you find it, that's a prize in itself. And then once you until you open your mouth and say, "Hey, I found one," then the other kids come and say, "Where'd you find that?" Kind of like that's what it's like there when you pepper out all these materials and goods all throughout the verse, and you find it. Either you keep your mouth shut or you tell your friends, and then all of a sudden this activity starts to happen, and then all of a sudden, as pirates stay out of the stay in the outskirts because hey, they're lawbreakers. They're passively using radar to see, oh, wait a minute, I'm seeing several myths. There's Kelosal with the myths E going back and forth. Oh, hell no, he's got Easter eggs. I'm coming after him. And then all of a sudden, the system takes on its own process because now the things are set in motion, cause and effect. Now the pirates can raid these ships, shipjack, and now they have goods to take to go to Pyro and whatever and do whatever they need to do for their bottom line. But again, they want to move away from scripting out or writing all these processes to do these missions. They just want to drop valuables here and there, and the quantum system itself will then determine, okay, this area is out of aluminum. We can't build the framework for ships. We need aluminum. And then you got to find that Easter egg, which is aluminum. Once you find it, you're taking it, you're haul-assing back over to Louisville to drop the aluminum to make ships. And then all of a sudden, you're back and forth because now you found a good bit of this material, and then here comes the pirates because they're tracking you. It's their job to track you, whether they're NPCs or real pirates.
You want to say something, Colossal?
Well, I mean, I think about all that stuff that you're saying. I think about going back to as a social studies teacher and as history teacher. You think about the state of nature, right? When you pretty much got the survival of the fittest, and that notion where everybody's going in and everybody's in that school of fishing and everybody's in that one tunnel and somebody comes in and just picks about and says, "I get a fish, I get a fish, I get a fish," and then you got to have somebody that comes in and says, "Ah, no, you don't, stop grabbing that fish." You know, that's when you come in with the law and order system. And but then I also thought about things like, okay, well, what if we're in a system that don't have aluminum? And are they going to have a system set up with their quantum system where nothing is sold that would be aluminum because there's nothing in that system that has it, because that system has either no planets or moons that can't produce it or don't have it. And so, I mean, I haven't seen any talk about that, but I'm quite sure that type of algorithm is going to be even more difficult or maybe easy for them to put in. Because if you're flying through a system that makes it all better, it makes it more interesting as you're flying through the system, or trying because now you have to travel. You want aluminum, and you need that aluminum to make that quantum drive or something like that. And you may have to go through 3 or 4 systems because those systems that you're going through doesn't have it. So now you got to have an algorithm that makes sure that those systems don't have those types of parts or minerals or alloys, whatever you want to call them.
Or what happens when you hit that system that does have it, right? But like Kimmy said, the word has gotten out. You know what I mean? Like everybody and their mother is trying to pull from that system. Then you have to start determining, man, is it worth even trying? Or do you just go ahead and move on someplace else and start, trying to find it someplace else? And something you said, Erris, earlier, it was talking about, the original thing about 100 systems. I've always said, if they make 20 systems, look at the real estate that already exists. You know what I mean? 100 systems is the pipe dream, but if he gets to 20 to 50 systems, oh my God, the amount of real estate in this game would be ridiculous. So once it starts getting spread out like that, but like you said, if this economy system isn't there, there's nothing to drive us. There's nothing worth taking the risk of taking your ship through jump points or wormholes or NPC battles. If you can't, like you said, Kimmy, if that bottom line isn't being hit, am I going to really risk taking my Kraken?
Welcome to the Starliner. You don't even have fuel to fly your ship.
Yeah. And wait till that happens, right? Wait till people start weeping about having to go start throwing dead bodies out the back of their ship because they got to earn some money real quick, right?
Well, hello to
Standing room
the.
only on the blue line,
all sort of
star line.
This is all sort of something that CIG have talked about before when it comes to ships, and you lose your ship, and the ability to replace that ship. You won't be able. I mean, something like an Aurora, yeah, you can probably get a new Aurora. An insurance will pick you up a new Aurora anywhere because they're everywhere. But if I don't know, an 890 jump. Yeah, you may have a Kraken. Yeah, you may have insurance on that, but it has to be built. It has to be where one that has the facilities to build it, and two that has all the materials to build it. And they actually talked a lot. I mean, tests were the reasons that they talked about it, because tests are the reason basically everything happens. But the idea that an entire org could essentially blockade a factory if there's only one place that the 890 jump is created, blockades that factory so that factory can't get anything in, or else, guess what? You're not getting your 890 jump back.
They spoke on that, Erris. Yeah, at some point you can clog up the pipe, but you better believe Tony is going to send some crystals of NPCs down that drain and draino that blockage with NPCs to say, wait a minute, we're not getting. They're going to give out word to say, hey, there's a blockade, and all of a sudden that 90% is going to rain hell down onto that blockade and say, okay, let's see how long you're going to hold this down. And that's going to be the challenge. That's going to be interesting, right? But at some point they're going to beat it down. And then you're going to have piling on actual players too to jump in, because those become mission givers. Hey, we got security. We got alerts that there's a blockade, pirates, and we got X amount of UEC of bounty on their heads. Oh yeah, let's take them out.
Hello to the Apollo, hello to the Crucible, and hello to the Reclaimer. Those y'all out there, those are wonderful systems, wonderful areas to chime in that.
Just sit behind the moon and wait for the
Good point.
destruction. Huh? Just sit behind the moon and wait.
Don't forget the vulture, baby. Don't forget the vulture. I'm gonna be in it.
Yeah, Erris,
Black boxes included.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that idea about blockades and the things that will, and not just as simple as blockades. I'm also
Ship
thinking about.
graveyards.
We've talked about this risk versus reward thing before, and originally everybody's thinking, I'm going to take my so and so out. I'm going to take this out. But as soon as you get that first insurance report that says, oh yeah, your ship will be ready in 4 days. The word is going to spread real quick. And a lot of people, I always tell people, don't underestimate these starter ships. I tell you, I fly in them all the time. And I'm telling you, like you said earlier, easy to get in Aurora, but when your Polaris gets trashed, all your buddies say, hey, let's take your Polaris out. Boom, that bad fella's gone. They say, see you in 7 days. We'll see when you get it back. You're going to be like, oh man, was it really worth it? Risk versus reward is really going to mean something in this game.
Let's fly your 890 instead.
All right, here we go.
It's the solution. Yeah, I'm supposed to flip.
We'll flip over to the end.
Yep, let's go ahead and flip the screens.
It's exciting, I really promise.
There we go.
Yeah, there it is.
So this is Quantum, and I know what you're thinking, and I've seen this before. If the visuals look, particularly familiar, it's because we started with the solar system map that we released years ago. But this really is a totally different beast.
Star map.
The original star map referenced static data. There was nothing dynamic about it. But Quantum is totally different. For starters, it has access to all of the backend services and can pull whatever data it needs from them. Everything you see on the screen then, that's real-time data pulled from the game. So let's go ahead and take a quick tour of the system. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and jump on over to everyone's favorite gas giant, Crusader. And in the background there, you can see Port Olisar. Let's go ahead and bring that up. Now, I mentioned that we're connected to all the real-time data. Let's go ahead and see what the players are up to.
Can I have this now?
Yeah, this was pretty amazing stuff.
So, Each of those red dots is a real player, thousands of them across well over 100 servers. Now,
Actually online.
to be honest, we recorded this earlier mainly because we didn't know how many people would be playing the game while we were doing this show.
'Cause y'all are right here, right?
And I figured it would be totally anticlimactic to say, here are all the players, and 3 dots showed up. So let's go ahead and continue the tour of the solar system and jump on over to Daymar. And you can see a number of people affixed to the planet. Some of those obviously are going to be at outposts. Some of them are inevitably mining. Over there on the right, you can see the current player list. Let's go ahead and see what a couple players are up to. Just go ahead and highlight them so we can see where they're at. And let's go ahead and jump to Circo Worm and see where he's at. It looks like he's in Lorville.
It's Big Brother keeping an eye on you.
Here he is. Hi, buddy.
And you can actually see some deaths down on the planet there. So obviously there's been some conflict there. And you actually see, let's go ahead and back out a little bit and find there's a contract to the right. You have access to missions, so you can see that Calypso's Norwang is requesting personal transport to Lorville, and he's willing to pay $4,500.
Good on you, buddy.
Let's go ahead and jump on over to Ariel, and we can get a view of those probability volumes that I was talking about earlier. And so what you're seeing here, as I mentioned, there are a variety of different types and lots of different content and thematic tags for all these things. So you can see everything from the default tags, you can see the security reinforcement tags, the bounty hunter tags, the spoofing tags. There are a number of these. We'll be adding more. In general, what it's doing is, as I mentioned, it's basically representing things in probabilistic state because it's too expensive for us to fully simulate them. Now let's go ahead and jump over to a shop. Let's check out the Hicks Research Station that's on Cellin. Yeah, we've got to go over to Crusader. And let's go ahead and open up that shop.
Oh, look, here's...
Yep, there's Outpost Korea, and you can see that there's a lot of death around there. And over on the right at the Hicks Research Station, you can see all the things that it buys and sells and what those prices have been doing over time.
Something this detailed and this data oriented.
Now, I suspect I know what you're thinking at this point. This is all very cool, but it doesn't really solve any of the fundamental problems that I mentioned earlier, and that's totally true. So let's clear the board and get to that.
Can you stop right there, Griff, just for a second? Would this be a possibility if they're going to put this in the ship HUDs? Like maybe your, like maybe your, like the Carrick. You know, the Carrick has the area in the back of the ship, the cartography. Yeah. And there's a possibility. I know Jared sat there and said that there's a possibility that he would, or at least he envisioned that those. That huge wall, that huge circular wall in the back could have all screens on it. Mm-hmm. And that was something that he envisioned. I mean, would this be able to be implemented in the game for each screen like that you can go ahead and use to look at something like this?
They mentioned that, Kay. They did, they did mention that.
Yeah.
All right, I just wanted to check and see if I wasn't going crazy.
The integration for the star map, I don't know if she was going to say Erris, but they did talk about integration of the star map eventually into the ships.
Right, that's the whole purpose of Spectrum, right?
Exactly. I mean, eventually, what you look at on that web version of the screen is going to be what we can pull up in our ships. I am interested in maybe, I don't know if Erris, if you're going to say something about the cartography, because the cartography is different from the, as you mentioned, Kelosal, on the Carrick, it's cartography in the back. But in the front, we have it on the 600 also, is the scanner, that globe that floats. There's two different things. And so one is more tactical versus the cartography. So I'm just kind of curious as what will be the distinctions between those two also.
They're going to go away from that Mobiglass app where you're in your ship and you're doing this inside your ship.
I never use it in my ship anyway. I always use the panels, but you're right. You're right. Go, Erris, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I mean, we'll never get this exactly because this is going to be a full-on, like this is just a dev tool.
Right.
But But you can think, I mean, in the back of the character, you'll probably have something like the star map where you can see all the star systems and everything. But then when we're talking about the the tactical station, you might actually get something somewhat similar to this based on the scanning job you've got someone. So if someone's doing a good enough job scanning for you, you might actually get this sort of circle, and here are the people around you.
Or maybe the information that comes from a data runner, right? The data runner gives you that info. That's what pops up on that tactical globe. You know, that could be another factor what comes up. I think that I love to use the word, here it comes fast cart, the fidelity of the screen might migrate into it. Yeah. But I think, but how much of the data, Kelosal, I think it's a good point. It's just that how much of this data, real-time data, is going to be relevant to gameplay versus, as you said, Erris, what's going to be more developer-oriented stuff that we see. I'm sure there'll be some portions of it, you know, that we will be able to get through data running, scanning, stuff of that nature.
Yeah, it'll be great if they put that in there.
We will see, to a degree, the Galactopedia aspect to the systems as well, to get an overview of that system and the planets and moons.
That's a good point.
It'd be nice if they had something like the Avatar. I already sent it to you, CIG. Look to your issue council.
But don't use that as gospel.
On the ship, right?
Avatar.
Yeah, we were watching Avatar a couple weeks ago. Their scanning that they had for the planetary scanning was amazing. And Kelosal sent that to them a long time ago, said, this should be the scanning in Star Citizen. So,
wow.
All right, here we go, guys.
Us to have one unified world where we can, simulate millions of NPCs and feed back into that all of the player actions into one unified whole. So there's really no difference. There are some optimized areas, the probability volumes that exist in between these two realities, but really this is the full-blown simulation. It takes into account all the player actions. So let's go ahead and start by bringing 1,000 Quanta to life. You on the wrong one? So, Jake here is cranking the number of Quanta up to 1,000.
Nothing short of
they're basically going to come streaming in from another system.
Way ahead of the game.
There.
These are simulated entities. The real significance of this is when you're talking about working out the vast multitude of details that we really need to allow this universe to evolve and feel dynamic, we don't actually need all of the incredibly high fidelity, super computationally expensive stuff that we would get if we were actually simulating these NPCs the traditional way on the server so that they look exactly like they would when you see them. These NPCs don't need to do animations. They don't need to do physics. They don't need to do collision detection. They don't need to do a whole slew of things that we couldn't afford to do. It'd be incredibly expensive to try. And in the end, even if we did it, it wouldn't make the end results any more accurate. So
they also have personality traits too. Like each one has a little bit of something going on.
Yeah, there are a number of different traits that we're modeling. We're still working out the exact configuration. One of them is ambition, and that specifies how far a quantum can push themselves relative to others, whether in crime or legitimate enterprise. Another one is intelligence, and that dictates what sort of things they can pursue and how well they can do something. Happiness is a measure of whether a quantum, the singular form of Quanta, is miserable or content, and unhappy Quanta want to change their situation, move to a new location, change occupations, and that sort of thing. Aggression controls the lengths to which a quantum will go to achieve their objective.
Just don't feed them.
A business-oriented quantum with a lot of aggression might push their workers harder, trading their happiness for more profit, and as a result have to deal with more turnover. And lastly, criminality, that determines the amount of criminal behavior that a quantum will consider. No criminality equates to a law-abiding quantum. Having a very little means that they might be willing to commit some minor crimes like smuggling or illegal mining. And a lot means that they're open to piracy and murder. They can have possessions, store up money, own a ship or property, have a home. Now, all of these quanta have basically come to rest within the system. And the reason for that is because there's nothing for them to do. There's no reason for them to get up off of the couch. So, let's jump to the next slide.
This is when it gets good.
we're going to add a little bit of interest to the system by adding an aluminum mine to Delamar. So we've now injected a mine onto Delamar, and yet you see the Quanta still refuse to do anything. And that's because there's no economic reason for them to do it. There's nothing to do with the ore that they could go and extract. Let's go ahead and open up that card, though. So that card represents the mine on Delamar, and you can see a couple of stats towards the top, quantity and purity. And what these are is basically telling you how much of that material is in that mine, and purity is to some degree a measure of concentration. It effectively details how easy it is to extract it. There are a couple of parameters at the bottom that are temporary. Those will eventually be derived from those top two parameters, but for right now we can override it for some of the testing that we've been doing. So let's go ahead and jump to the next. So now we're going to go ahead and add an aluminum refinery to Crusader. And immediately you will see the Quanta start springing to life. And what's happening is they've all figured out that refinery, it wants to build up a stockpile of aluminum. And in order to do that, it needs some raw aluminum ore. And thus, it's willing to pay for it. And so the Quanta are seizing upon that economic opportunity, heading out to Delamar, doing the work, extracting that ore, and taking it back to the refinery. And this will continue until it's full. So let's go ahead and open that card up again, and we can watch the refined aluminum ore gradually build up. You can also see the number of workers. A few of the Quanta, so you see many of them actually acting as miners. There's also a number of them that are working in that refining factory. Refineries can't process this material without labor, and there's a formula that dictates how much labor is required in order to process this stuff. And so they have to hire a sufficient number of workers in order to actually execute this operation. And so this would continue for quite a while. Let's go ahead and speed up the simulation a bit and go ahead and keep watching the aluminum inventory. That's finished, so they're now building up their raw ore to basically load up, and after that, the entire economy comes to a halt. The one refiner we've added has no more incentive to buy more. Its storage houses are already full, and therefore it's not willing to buy. Since it's not willing to buy, the Quanta
That's when you should see the prices just drop.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is add a factory. But before we do that, let's head on over to the power plant formula. And you can see here that building a power plant, just like refining ore, requires something. It requires 10 workers working for a duration of 60 ticks. And it also, notably, requires 2 units of refined aluminum ore in order to produce one power plant.
It's got to be more complicated than that, I promise. So.
Yes. Again, we're building up. So let's go ahead and add the factory to Hurston.
Oh, look at that. Aluminum and laranite.
Slow down.
Oh, going too fast there. Slow on down.
Some of those components.
And so once again, you see the economy spring to
Those
life.
elements
And
create
now you've actually got
components,
2
chip
different
components.
tiers going.
Probably a
The
quantum drive.
factory,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and open up the
Chip
factory.
equal more components.
The factory, just like the refinery, needs workers in order to
So that's a
build these power
constant.
plants. It also needs refined aluminum. So now you've got multiple things going on. The factory is willing to buy refined aluminum. Someone has to transport that aluminum from Crusader to Hurston. So some of the Quanta are basically working, they're basically working as freighters to move that product from one location to another. Some of them were working at the factory on Hurston. Some of them were working at the refinery on Crusader. Some of them are heading back to Delamar to actually do more mining. So you've got an entire little, economic cycle going here. However, it's going to wind up coming to a dead end here. Let's go ahead and accelerate it again. just like what we saw before, because eventually the factory fills up all of its warehouses. It can't take any more. It therefore has no more, it has no more need for refined aluminum. That will eventually shut down the refinery, which will in turn eventually kill off the miners. And you can see there that
it's
the
going to kill all
inventory
the
is still
miners.
building on the aluminum, which is why there's still some activity.
There's a lot, yeah. But as soon as it's done, it starts
The
flatlining.
NPCs
so
are
they
smarter
see
than
the
us
inventory's
in that
capped out.
sense.
Yep. And now
We're
they're
probably
almost
dumb
done.
just looking around and
The
mining
factory
for
is
stuff.
basically got it's got all it can handle. The refinery has all of its all it can handle. Therefore, the entire loop draws to a close again. So let's add one more node. Let's add a shop that sells power plants to ArcCorp.
There you go.
Slow it down again. And so now the loop is a bit more complicated. The shop is it's a retail shop, it's looking to sell power plants. In order to do that, it needs to be able to buy them for one price, sell them for another. So it adds its markup on, and it, just like the factory that requires transport of the refined aluminum from Crusader to Hurston, it needs the power plants transported from the factory to it. And so if you notice, if the individual Quanta, they'll actually have a little translucent circle around them if they're carrying goods. And so you can easily differentiate whether or not the ones that are moving, for example, from Hurston back to the mine are empty. They're going to load up on ore. And then when they're heading back to Delamar, and then from Delamar back to Crusader, they've actually all got ore. And so this loop will actually continue indefinitely. And the reason is because we've cheated something for tonight, and it sounds very similar to what I was basically saying was a bad idea earlier, which is the shop right now is a simple consumer. It's burning off that inventory. The difference here is that the solution to that is very simple in the context of quantum. And the reason is these quanta, the next step of what we'll be working on is they'll actually require ships. Ships require engines. And so all of a sudden there's a real demand for how many power plants do you need? How many ships do you need? It all follows those.
Okay, let me stop for my light bulb moment here. The NPCs will need to buy components for their ships.
Everyone.
I mean, we've always thought about this game from a two-dimensional space of what we're purchasing as real players, but to think that not only will NPCs have ships, they will need to equip their ships as well. That's mind-blowing for me.
And not only equip their ships, but replace their ships when we blow them up.
Yes.
So every pirate ship that you go in and blow up is a pirate ship that's going to need to be replaced, which will fuel the economy. It's just
keeping it in perspective. That's all of us, guys. I mean, that not just NPCs who's 90% of the verse, but the 10% who are us, who are randomly we're trying to run cargo, and we're in the mix as well because we've been pirated or we've been shipjacked and stripped of our components and left floating. So we're in that school of fish as well.
Yeah.
And the sharks have taken over basically. So it's like, what are we gonna do? We're skating up the hill.
Kelosal, you got anything on that?
What are you going to do? You're going to own an Apollo, a Crucible, or a Vulture. That's what you're going to do.
Yeah, true.
Because that's going to be your side job when you ain't got the real job.
Yes. You have to be versatile.
What you're going to do is you're going to pay your taxes.
You have to be versatile.
You're going to pay your taxes because taxes are important, and taxes fund the UEE, which will defend you. Pay your taxes.
Military ships.
Or you could be a pirate.
They're going to have their problems as well. I mean, because they're going to have to stay on the outskirts. They're going to have to stay away from those lanes where there's security details.
Yeah.
And they need components and stuff. It's going to be tough.
Yeah. It's just for me, most of the games that we played have always been mostly dependent upon human gameplay. And so for me to hear that this much detail has been put into NPC AI gameplay is just mind-blowing to me because, again, while we're sleeping, this stuff is still going on. You know what I mean? You come back to the game and things have changed. If you've been gone for a week, has the economy shifted? Has a system that was very good to you before no longer, the system that
Yes.
you need to go to,
I have a good
here's-
analogy.
Hang on, let Erris
Go
was gonna
ahead,
say something.
Erris.
I've got the real question for you all. So we keep being told that we're the 10% of real players in this 90% simulation. But are we really being told that? And we're actually the simulation. We're the AI running.
Okay, all right. The blue pill or the red pill? Which one do you want? That's
Yes.
what I want to know right
Yes.
now. Okay.
Yes, basically. Here's my analogy to this from all we were seeing, and when we talked about the terms of a script, and you have especially with this community here at Star Citizen, is that they are going to circumvent these scripts. They're going to figure these scripts out. Prime example, when we started doing the cargo runs, people were like, "Oh, you want the Laranite? Get the ice. Everything that's ice is valuable." And then they started having these tables to know exactly what to run. So it's scripted, and they will circumvent and they will spoof it. But here's the analogy where it comes in. Old school. Tabletop Dungeons and Dragons, you have the game master. So you're going through your adventure, and as you go through, the game master is making this creative adventure as you go along. Not that it's exactly scripted, but if something goes south, they will throw a curveball at you and make you think about what you're doing, right? That it's dynamic. And so in that sense, it's very unique in regards to Star Citizen, where you compare it with these other AAA games, it's a you're on rails, and people will figure out the bugs and workarounds to get to the next level. But this is something totally different, because it's a natural flow of how these things progress, and even though it's natural, there's random things that happen, and that's very unique in this game.
That's a good point. I remember in Eve, there would be times where the devs would jump into the game just to throw something at us. It was very spontaneous, unexpected. You're right, Kimmy. But for them to be able to do that, and the unpredictability of even the NPCs in the game. Who will they choose to pick and target? Who won't they choose and target? What are the demands that they're going to need? There's a lot here. There's a lot here. It's very ambitious as far to me. I don't know if you guys think it is, but I think that what they're putting together is unparalleled when it comes to AI in these type of MMO games. We've seen some pretty decent AI, but this is kind of taking it to the next level as far as I'm concerned. So,
well, once again, this is where the lore steps in, because just like Eve does, and Eve tends to control its gameplay through its lore, then Star Citizen could do the same thing. I mean, you could see a drastic stoppage of supply based off of, let's say, for right now, we got an election. Okay, you have a war that could be going on in the area. You could have an invasion that could interrupt all this. Then now you're going to have player dynamic controlled economy step in, and it's in collaboration with that. Does the player controlled economy help augment or modify or dictate what's going on with the NPC with Quanta or Quantum? I mean, these are the things where we keep talking about that we're waiting for in game. I've been talking about player driven economies for a long time. But when your lore steps in on this, it takes the game to a new level, because now you can generate excitement and immersion through that and change the spectrum of the universe, galaxy, or system that you're in. So I just can't wait until they finally start implementing that, because you're not going to see this constant flow all the time.
Good point, Kay.
I just want to clarify one last thing before we can get back to it. It's as absolutely astounding and impressive as Quantum and Quanta are, they're not really AI. So the actual in-game AI is going to be something completely different. It's something that CIG still have to do a lot of work on.
Right.
Yes.
But this is the system behind it. It's the systematic economy is just nuts.
Yes,
it's a good point. And thank you for making that distinction. Thanks for making the distinction, because it does. It's separate from the AI. And I thought the other thing that was impressive was him talking about how by them doing this, they don't have to actually create what was it, the AI, whatever they call it. He said, in other words, we don't have to create these entities that exist in the game where you have to worry about collision. This is where they're saving all that memory space and whatnot. It's based just on probability, and if the probability strikes, then it's initiated. But if not, it's always running in the background, always running.
It's thousands and thousands of Schrodinger's cats.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Okay, here we go.
Same, logical equations. So let's go ahead and add a bit more economic complexity.
Actually, a slide.
So thus far, we've shown a very basic economic loop. One commodity, one refinery, one factory, and one retail shop. The real world, of course, is far more complicated. You'll have lots of different commodities, refining and production nodes, retail shops, and of course players in Quanta competing against one another for a limited supply of goods and services. It's this competition, this economic natural selection, that ensures that things remain in balance, that a logical equilibrium is reached. Should have already gone to it. So, next. So, our current architecture basically has players connecting to a game server. And then we've got services behind the scenes that can feed information to these servers and receive information back in return. And so you can see here, we've got shop services and probability volume services and all of this sort of thing. The basic problem with this arrangement is that services don't have any knowledge of what NPCs are doing, or rather what they should be doing. So that shop service that controls the prices, it's got algorithms, but it has no real understanding. It doesn't understand that there are 10,000 NPCs that do or don't need this, or what pirates are doing, or any of that. We don't simulate at that high level anywhere within the game right now. You have servers that basically instantiate the stuff near you, and you have the services that can run these formula, and that's basically it. Now, they can implement these services, these algorithmic price calculations, but supply and demand only come from players and hard-coded formulae. And it's the same for missions and PVs. The data is completely static and can't evolve. The number of servers, of course, as we've seen here, it varies depending upon how many players are in the game. So let's go ahead and add Quantum. Quantum changes this in dramatic fashion. It gives us a place where we can efficiently simulate NPC behavior and then feeds that behavior to the game server so that players can experience it. Further, it allows player actions to be fed back into the simulation so that there's no meaningful difference between the real and simulated worlds. Quantum creates a complete loop. NPCs can be simulated in efficient fashion. And I actually meant to say that Quantum feeds the services, which in turn feed the game servers. So let's go ahead and get back to the simulation. And what we're going to do now is alter the power plant formula. So let's add a bit of complexity by changing the production formula for power plants to require laranite.
We're gonna add some.
We need to change. No, we need to change the production formula.
No, we gotta change the. We're gonna add laranite first.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we do want to add the new mine first. So we're going to add a laranite mine to Walla. And then we want to go ahead and add a refinery for this laranite. We'll add that to the Hurston L3. And now let's go ahead and adjust that power plant formula.
Hint, refinery at Hurston L3.
And we're going to change the power plant formula. Right now it requires 0 laranite. We're going to change that to 2. And what we're going to very quickly see here is that we're going to start getting some laranite flowing to the Hurston factory so that the power plants can continue to be created. Yep, and that's that loop of guys right there. That's what they're taking. Now, one of the important things here is that let's go ahead and look at the Hurston aluminum. Bring Hurston factory aluminum. Now, what wound up happening there is it was very low for a period of time, and that's because they were actually burning off that aluminum inventory as fast as they could get it. And the reason why you see that spike there in the aluminum inventory is because as soon as we altered the formula so that power plants now require laranite, they were still receiving from all these freighter transports. They still had aluminum coming in, but they could no longer produce power plants. So it stalled, and then all of a sudden they started stockpiling. And then when you see that the aluminum started falling, that's because finally they started receiving supplies of laranite, and they were able to resume the production process. And so all of a sudden, their aluminum started getting burned off at a natural rate. Yeah. So now we're going to add a bit more laranite out in the asteroid fields, and Jake's going to handle that via macro. And now let's go ahead and increase the supply of aluminum and see what happens. So we're going to add a few new mines. So let's add an aluminum mine to Cellin first. And let's add one to Aberdeen as well.
This is not your dad's
And lastly,
game.
we're going to do Lyria.
This is definitely not Nintendo 8-bit back in the
And
day.
if you remember, we already have an aluminum mine on Delamar. They're telling us we need to hurry up.
You jump ahead, I guess.
You guys want us to hurry up or keep going? All right, so it's like 400 to 1.
Tony the Ringmaster.
Nobody puts
He
Tony
say
over.
right. Did he say don't encourage him?
Let's add a couple more aluminum refineries as well to the Crusader L4 and ArcCorp L1.
Crusader L4.
Yep, and ArcCorp L1.
Yep.
So now let's go ahead. We just added all of this new aluminum. So let's head back to that Hurston factory and see what aluminum prices are doing there. What's that factory having to pay for aluminum with all this new supply, these new mines, these new refineries? And there you see that the price is starting to fall off. Can you speed it up a little bit? Let's let you see what it does. And if you see, it continues to plummet. So those prices are pretty much falling off a cliff now. From all that extra supply that's been brought on without us having to go back and rebalance anything. So let's go ahead and head on over to Cellin. And you can see that Cellin is in very close proximity to Crusader. So you've got an aluminum refinery and aluminum mining, yet there's very little activity. And the reason is because the aluminum at that mine is very difficult to extract. So let's go ahead and adjust the mining time on Cellin from 180 to 120.
There it is.
And what this again reflects is how difficult it is to extract from that particular location. And so you see there now you see a few guys are actually willing to put in the amount of work necessary to extract it. Not all of them, it's still a lot of effort. And this comes back to every one of these guys having their own individual set of traits. So some of them were willing to endure, more risk, more, more effort, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead now and increase the laranite consumption.
Hurry up a little bit. You can jump ahead to the.
Let's just go at the normal pace.
All right. There you go.
So let's make the laranite more difficult to work with and more rare and see what happens there. So we're going to adjust the global laranite refining time from 60 to 120.
We're adjusting the time on Walla to be.
We're going to do both. The global refining time, we want to take it to 60 to 120. And Walla's extraction time goes from 60 to 180.
That's right.
60 to 120. Laranite. So what we've just done is basically make it more time consuming, more difficult to refine it, and we've basically made it more difficult to pull it out of the ground. So let's go ahead and apply a macro also to reduce the default purity of laranite from 50 to 16%, which means that refineries are going to need more ore to produce the same amount of refined product.
7 noobs.
We active? And now let's go ahead and take a look at the laranite prices on the Hurston factory. So we just did 3 different things to make it considerably, more expensive for laranite to be utilized.
Speed up that time.
And you speed it up, and you can see that laranite prices are going up. It looks like they're starting to skyrocket. This could be a complete economic disaster. If you notice, they're just going up. So what we're going to do now to bring that back into control is let's go adjust the power plant formula to compensate a bit. So let's adjust it from, instead of 2 laranite, let's change it to 0.1. So we just reduced the amount of laranite needed in the economy by 95%. And let's head back and check out the prices again. And what we should see here in a minute is laranite should start to drop off pretty significantly. And there you go.
Crisis averted.
And this will continue to drop if we watch it. You always get a little bit of turbulence because you've already got contracts set up and stuff.
Right.
Go ahead and leave it in. I want to see it drop a little bit more.
We all want to see it, Tony.
So it's already down 40, 50%, and it'll keep falling.
I'm sorry
Okay.
for 890 jump on
So
this.
now let's go ahead and add
There's
some
a
additional
hiccup in the
factories.
materials to build this
Delamar
shit.
looks pretty dead. There isn't a lot of economic activity happening over there. So let's add a bit of life by adding a new power plant factory.
Yeah, I went over here too.
And yeah, let's add a Hurston L4 factory for power plants as well to create a little bit of competition for aluminum. And then let's head on over to Hurston factory, and let's check out their workers. You notice that their workers are falling off a cliff. What is happening? Well, we just opened up a new power plant factory, and they're getting offered better wages from another place. And so, and what are the wages
It's going down somewhere.
on Hurston?
I'm gonna grab this guy.
Let's see what the wages that they were offering. I can't see it. So they were up at, is that 0.25?
Yeah, Delamar's offering like almost 3 times the wages of.
Yep, so there you see the differential, which is that factory is more desperate for workers, and so you see, let's look at basically the workers skyrocketed on Delamar and plummeted on Hurston. And eventually those wages, of course, stabilize. They find a point of equilibrium, which is a big point of all of this. So let's go ahead now and make some major changes. We're going to do this with a macro, and you can see where we currently stand on the slide.
There's like a bunch of stuff that we were supposed to be showing here. Absorb it quickly, everyone.
There we go. So we've added lots of aluminum, titanium, and agricium. In the entries that you see on the screen marked system, all of the moons now have deposits. We've added a bit more laranite, but it's still pretty rare. We've also added a lot of
Stop that there real quick, Griff.
We've added cooler and quantum drive recipes.
Griff, can you stop for a sec?
Can you stop that for a second?
Yeah, I've stopped it. It stopped.
You're gonna have to go. You're gonna have to go back just a little bit.
You want what, to the diagram?
Those materials.
Yeah.
Are you taking notes?
Huh? Who? Me? No. Oh, okay. Thank you, Griff. There you go. All right. So I just want to take a wonderful picture of that one because that's going to give me some insight as what's going to happen in the next several months.
Oh, I could have sent you that later. He's so silly. Okay.
I mean, but I'll just.
interesting.
I mean, this is interesting here. If they're going to if they're going to proceed with this,
Yeah.
you know, then this is going to be telling for those of us who are the minors of the group
Yep.
because this right here is valuable. It's going to let you know what type of resources you can exploit.
Mm-hmm.
But keep in mind, Kay, that it's dynamic. As
Right.
the supply and demand goes, those values will go up and down
Mm-hmm.
based upon if they have it or if those veins are depleted or not.
Mm-hmm.
So they've set this up so that you can't spoof it. It's not going to be a script anymore. It's gonna be a living, breathing economy.
Based on
At some
demand.
point, you may find that aluminum is more valuable than gold, diamond because of its demand.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Stuff that we ignore, right, Kimmy? Like stuff like corundum and stuff that folks just don't even want to mess with, or aluminum.
Yes.
You might find that's the thing in that system to churn out like crazy for a
Yes.
couple of reasons, right? As a miner, think about how much time you spend looking for laranite, right, or bexylite, versus how much time you spend running across aluminum.
Yes.
And you might decide to say, hey, if I fill up this caterpillar in 1 hour versus me spending 3 freaking hours trying to find laranite, because of course they're going to make it more scarce. Right now it's in there just to keep us happy. But if you've got to dig deeper, we haven't even gotten into this whole thing about, he said that they're going to start putting resources deeper down in the planet. They're going to be to this surface stuff no more. What does that mean when you've got to start literally pulling materials out of the deeper part of a moon? And what type of equipment is that going to take that maybe we haven't even seen yet? So,
Yep.
the value of a lower end material right now or resource could mean, literally you're doing quite well. Again, as Kimmy said, depending on on demand in that system, what's hot right now, what's not hot anymore. You'll have to work it out.
But Colossal makes a great point, though, because when you look at the essential components or elements that we need in the system, Quantanium will never lose its value.
Mm-hmm.
And so, knowing Tony Z, it's going to be one of those rare occurrences that you stumble upon Quantanium, and it's volatile at that. So there's a short distance that you can go to safely transport that, but that value will always remain high in demand because we need that fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Or will it?
My point is,
Go ahead, Erris.
I'm being serious. So, yeah, you know what? Quantanium or whatever resource might be scarce in one system,
Mm-hmm.
but we have this mindset of one system because we've only had one system. What happens when there's a system that it's full of it?
Yes.
All it's got is Quantanium. So, and it can only disperse through a couple of systems easily, and then you need someone for it to be valuable. You need someone with a hull E to take it from that system 17 systems away.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's value, right? Like it's everything, right? We can't think of just one system because the real value for hauling, the real value for cargo is going to be those
Jumps.
long
Making
hauls.
those jumps,
It's
yep.
the,
long haul.
Yes. A starfarer to help you make those jumps. So it's not about doing it yourself. On a bigger scale, you have to scale up who you know, who's your friends in the game.
Not even, right? I jump into a system and then I set up a request. I need fuel at this location.
Mm-hmm.
And then I jump to another one, right? And you run that way. And maybe you even set up per system. I need what's it called when someone flies with you and keeps you safe?
Escort.
They're like
escort.
Yeah. I was thinking security blanket.
Security detail.
Like I need a safety blanket from here to here, and then I need a security from here to here, and you set it all up, and you've got this entire route that you follow because you've got a hulley full of,
Yeah.
It's so many layers.
Yep.
And can you afford the best? Can you afford the best, Erris?
All right, here we
That's
go.
a
I'm not
question.
going to be able to afford anything. I am the worst.
All right, here we go.
On the screen marked system, all of the moons now have deposits. We've added a bit more laranite, but it's still pretty rare. We've also added a lot of new refineries. We've added cooler and quantum drive recipes to most factories, and they require aluminum, laranite, titanium, and degreasium. The demand for coolers and quantum drives has been introduced, and we've also increased the demand for power plants. And lastly, we've increased, you can see there at the bottom of the screen, the number of quanta from 1,000 to 2,000 so that we've got enough workers to keep the economy humming. Now, previously, we've seen pretty obvious cause and effect. At this point, though, the economy is starting to get pretty complicated. And we can look at a few graphs to just see what's going on with some of the prices to see this. And this is one of the most interesting things about a really complicated economy, which is these changes in quantities and prices, the purposeful movement of quanta, this dynamism. These are all opportunities that you're going to be able to exploit within the game, and they're in constant logical motion. So, let's hit the next one.
Be a shame if somebody came to steal from these people, huh?
Yep, we'll bring up the slide.
Oh, okay.
You gotta bring the slide.
Oh boy, here we go.
There it is.
All right, so now we've introduced some pirates.
Oh boy.
Let's go ahead, and so you can see that there are 4 pirate kraken. There's the Nova Riders, Low Riders, Nine Tails, and Dusters. Pirates have to return to one of their bases in order to refuel, rearm. Let's go ahead. If you notice, they head to the areas of highest value.
Sharks amongst the school of fish.
Let's go ahead and zoom in there. And you can see that those are missions being created by the NPCs, no different than players would. In other words, you see a lot of deaths on a route that's got a lot of value. And let's go ahead and hover over some of those contracts. These are contracts that are being thrown out by the NPCs on that route. What's happening is the NPCs are basically being, some of the freighters are being picked on by the pirates, the ship is being destroyed, and now that NPC has ejected and needs transport back to civilization. And so they're requesting that. And these are missions that would be fed back into the game that you'd see, and you could wind up accepting these. Let's go ahead and take a look at Hurston, the coolers and quantum drives.
What about the ability to go ahead and get discarded cargo?
What do you want to go check out?
The Hurston, let's look at what happened to the cooler and quantum drives.
Oh, yeah.
So since we've now got a lot of pirate activity on that route, we want to see what's happening to the cost of some of those goods.
For a cool 500,000 UEC, you can get yourself your own power plant.
Yeah, I can barely see that.
That sounds about right.
It's actually normal. Piracy is really terrible for economics, you guys. So,
Yeah. So let's go ahead now.
you can really see it over at the coolers where it started at like a really reasonable thing. Like
Yeah,
1,000.
that's pegged. It's the scale. So basically, they were down around 1,000, 2,000, and now they just absolutely skyrocketed in price because so many of the freighters moving, whether it's supplies or moving the finished product from one location to another, are now being intercepted. And these quanta, as I mentioned earlier, it's like they have various traits, and some of them are very risk averse, and they won't go down routes where there's a significant chance of death.
Quick pit stop here for me. I'm going to toss in my pitch about this is what drove me crazy about Eve, was that if there was piracy or you were being attacked as a miner, that there was no impact on the economy, that the price of ships stayed the same, resource, nothing changed, and that drove me crazy. I didn't mind getting attacked. I just didn't mind that there were no repercussions. I don't mean directly to me, but if you're cutting off all the people who are, let's say, mining ice because of oxygen and everything, that you needed that, there should have been some impact economically in the game. And so I like the fact that if people are impacting a system, impacting a trade route, that if I happen to go into this particular, what's the place called where you buy parts and equipment? I can't think of that guy's joint, the name of the place in the game. But if I go in there to buy a quantum, you know, a cooler, and I say, holy smoke, 20,000, this thing was 3,000 last month. You know what I mean? I love that dynamic that we'll see impact based upon what's going on in systems, which may make me say, either do I have the money to pay that extra over cost on it, or am I going to get in my ship and just go someplace else and go to another system to buy it because I just don't have the money to buy. I've had that happen before, right? You don't have the money to buy that quantum drive you want, but it's cheaper over someplace else. You know, that might be another factor that I'll do too. So I like the fact that the economy is being impacted. Dumpers Depot. Thank you, Mikey. I appreciate that, buddy.
And so to counteract some of this danger, let's go.
And this is Eve didn't have a Tony Z.
Good point. Good point.
Go ahead and bring in someone to fight the pirates. So here comes some security. And what you'll notice is that security is drawn to areas of conflict where there's a lot of deaths and such. So they're going to wind up gravitating towards those areas where there's a lot of piracy. And there you can see them. Go ahead and over. Go speed it up a little bit. Not 200. It's 200 is too fast. It's difficult to tell what's going on. And if you notice, by the way, the police will wind up patrolling an area, so they're in constant motion, whereas the pirates basically are enabling quantum interdiction fields. That's why they're basically picking a route on, you know, they're picking a particular location on the route between, you know, between two locations, and they're basically, you know, lying in wait. And the security, which doesn't know exactly where they are, is scanning the area looking for them. And so what you notice here is that the pirate situation is starting to look a lot better now that security's shown up. And you would see this reflected over in the prices. And so what you have here is a perpetual game of cat and mouse, to where the pirates look for the areas where they can reap the largest rewards with the least amount of risk, and security is then drawn to them. And as soon as you get enough pushback from the system in terms of security, then the pirates look for, you know, more opportunistic, you know, pastures. And again, this is very much like what you would expect to see, you know, in any logical functioning system. So let's go ahead and turn on the grid. And what you're looking at here is one of the big problems I referred to earlier is how we wind up getting samplings of this, you know, of how we generate probability volumes. And so what this is showing you is we can look at one of these high conflict areas, and it's basically tabulating exactly what's in that area. So you can see that there are 10 total Quanta, 1 freighter, 11 pirates, 5 security. It also shows you the total value being transported. You know exactly what's going down that route. Let's take a look at a few other locations. Here you see the security and pirates are fairly even. 6 pirates, 7 security. You know, a decent amount of value, 6 freighters. So it's there's actually an almost equivalent number of freighters, pirates, and security. This is the information that Quantum, and it's a small piece of the whole, this is what it would wind up feeding periodically to the probability volume services, so that designers no longer need to go in and say, oh, well, we're going to hard code a certain amount of security, a certain amount of freighters, and it can never change. We ship it, that's all it's ever going to be. In this case, the simulation is running, it's constantly ebbing and flowing. And your actions over on the game side get factored into this result, just like any of the Quanta in this simulation.
And so that reminds me of X Foundation 4, X4 Foundation.
Oh yeah, X4, yeah.
Because they have a
So for
dynamic
years we've had
economic system.
just the back-end services.
And this
the
honeycomb
game
grid
servers,
is
and the
quite
fundamental
interesting.
problem was that we didn't have a single area where the entire game could be simulated, where NPCs could request goods and services because they have a legitimate economic need and could vie with players to provide those things. We didn't have a way for this activity to determine what you see as you wander around the universe, thus eliminating the need to spend enormous sums of effort configuring vast quantities of static data that could never deliver the dynamic experience we really wanted. Quantum solves all of these issues. It also provides us with a lot more context, which means that concepts not previously understood, like how much risk there is in taking an item from point A to point B, can now be easily calculated. Information like this is vitally important to the price discovery machinery, and as I spoke about earlier, in a properly functioning economy, such things can and will generate a lot of ripples. We also get the information necessary to properly customize mission content, meaning we can deliver a lot more environmental and mission diversity without having to do any more work. I've covered a few of the large areas that quantum will impact, but the effects will be felt far wider. How many NPCs you see at a landing zone, for example, and what they're doing can now change over time. Manufacturing towns might boom and bust depending upon how much commerce is passing through them at any given moment. NPCs can grow and evolve separately from their interactions with players into powerful bosses potentially, and you'll be able to witness their growth in lots of different ways. Criminal NPCs with a price on their head can move around the universe just like a player, making trying to catch them that much more fun. We've got a lot more work to do before Quantum is ready for integration with the rest of the game, but it's one of the last big steps in setting us up for a completely dynamic and systemic universe. Thanks for listening.
Okay, so now that our brains are fried, there was a lot there. Guys, just give us a couple of minutes. We are going to hit a part 2 to this, which is going to be Chris Roberts' response a week ago, where he responded to the community with one question that was asked, and it was in relation to this. But real fast, if you guys can give me just a real quick feeling of what stood out to you. Let me start with Erris, and I'll work my way down. Erris, anything in particular about this presentation that still resonates with you from a year ago?
I mean, it's the same thing has resonated with me from this presentation since the presentation was given. It's that Quanta is what is needed to make the game work. It's the only way to get the game to feel alive. It's really important, and it looks really, really good, and I want it in game.
Okay. Kelosal, what about you?
It's the economy, stupid. Okay, just that simple. I mean, it's just another way, or it's just one of the ways that I've been waiting for in game. You need an economy to give you a different facet of the game, other than Pew Pew Universe, or in addition to that. But it's all about the economy. Once you get an economy in that game, it can help drive lore, it can help establish lore, and it can help create content. So it's about time. I can't wait to see it.
Okay. Kimmy?
It's amazing that this is just the first iteration, and it shows how far in depth Tony Z and Sig is ahead of this game. Literally ahead of this game in laying down the foundation of making this gameplay so dynamic, and it's basically, it doesn't get old, right? It doesn't get old in the sense of just the first iteration. So as Erris has talked about the more locations, as Kelosal mentioned, certain aspects of certain elements that we are focused on to mitigate issues of, okay, we've lost this, how do we bounce back? So that dynamic of being versatile, and then these and ultimately all these different layers, and the point that I made that you can try and do this by yourself, but at the end of the day, you're going to be behind the 8-ball in the regards of the NPCs themselves. So this game encourages teamwork, working together, just to stay ahead. But at the same time, things randomly happen in the game that persist. And as you pointed out, Griff, you leave the game, you come back in, you're still in that same state of where you left things off as far as your items. But 24 hours ago, or like 3 days ago, you played, things change dynamically. And then all of a sudden you're chasing after something else. So again, this is not Nintendo. This is not AAA as we know it. This is the future of gaming as we see it. And this is the game that other AAA games do not want to see this come to fruition.
That's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, St. Tosin asked a question earlier. He said, well, if this gets put into the game, will things like Galog no longer be, will they be worth anything in the game? unless they come up with an API, Galog, that allows them to pull live data. Chris and them have made it very clear that they want that live data to be accessible to us in the game. They're trying to create this whole thing where Spectrum ties in, the website ties in, the game ties in. So when you're looking for the price of Laranite or what the best route is to go from here to there, ultimately they want to be able to provide that data within the game. So, but again, whether they'll create some API or something that allows Galog to say, hey, we can let you get real-time data so that you can keep up, maybe they will. But will people stop the game to bring up their browser at that point? If it's already built into the game, if it's built into the Moby, or if it's built into your ship's computers, very doubtful. That extra stepping will disappear. So thank you to the folks with Galog, though, because it's a great tool that they provide to the gamers. I mean, they really do. Yeah. And it may be a while before we see it. But once that stuff's in game, I have to wonder whether or not people are going to make that effort to jump out at all. So let me move into this next part here. Real quick, guys, you guys know that a week ago, Chris Roberts decided to post on Spectrum. He said, hey, feed me a question. Whichever one gets the most votes, I'm going to respond to it. And so we're going to jump to that very quickly. I'm going to try to read this. I'm going to stop at a couple points and get some feedback from our folks. If you guys haven't read it, bear with me. It's late. I'm tired, but I'm going to do my best to get through. Y'all know how Chris is. Very, very verbose in his explanations. Yes, I'm going to try to break it down here. Okay, and here was the question. The question is, how is the dynamic economy shaping up, and is server meshing an essential requirement before Quanta shows up? Tony, and this is Chris is responding, okay? Tony and his team have been spending a lot of time this year fleshing out the internal infrastructure of the dynamic economy universe simulation. Now, don't forget, guys, Tony had talked about this before CitizenCon 2019. Just as the last year, we got a lot more detail than we had ever had before. And Chris is going to kind of, and Chris is now 11 months later, even stepping it up even more. So here we go. One of the things is increasing data flow from the dedicated game servers, the DGS, to Quanta. These servers are what you as a client connect to handle the player's moment-to-moment simulation and are what will be meshed together eventually. They push up to the overall universe simulation the state of all players they are responsible for, but at a slower tick rate than they simulate, as Quanta doesn't need to be 30 frames per second, as it is a much bigger picture simulation. Linking to various game services, these are specific services for things like shops, commodities, resources, encounters, such as probability volumes or AI spawns, and service beacons that any DGS can query to get the global state of the universe. Services are how Quantum communicates the state of the universe, what you are calling the dynamic economy, to the various game servers. It's done this it's probably supposed to be, you say, way. It's done this way to not overload Quantum. Each service caches and updates the global state of the aspect, say prices of items in shops, for example. It is in charge of from Quantum, which is simulating this in a singular universe view, and then can share that on demand to the various DGS that query it. Doing this allows us to scale the DGS count and not worrying about overloading the singleton that is this universe's simulation. Bear with me on the reading there, guys. I'm sorry. Reading state from back-end databases like the persistent database, soon to be iCache, to track player states and assets. Improving Quanta, the representation of a group of AI in the universe simulation ability for their traits and proficiencies to drive their actions and occupation. And then lastly, it says improving the star map and player analytics so that you can have a full view of the player's activities such as travel, combat, purchases, etc. Okay, so this is where he gets into the other stuff here. Last year's demo at CitizenCon demonstrated the high-level simulation approach we are planning to take, but a lot of the plumbing necessary for the player to feel the effective dynamic universe shared by all players, not just solitary 50 player instances. Wow, sorry about that, guys. Don't know why that just happened. Where did I leave off at? I'm sorry.
50 player instances.
Thank you. Wasn't in. So the work that has happened since then was a necessary step to link it back to gameplay so people can see the cause and effect that a dynamic universe will bring. Over the next couple of quarters, the team is going to work on further fleshing out Quanta behaviors and varieties, such as, check this out, tourists, entertainers,
Stanton.
blue-collar workers, white-collar office workers, etc., and continue linking the overall simulation to the services to allow it to start to drive things in the game that you are playing, including the upcoming dynamic mission system. Fuel and repair costs are likely to be the first instance of pricing driven by the back-end simulation versus a formula in the service which it is now. From there, we will slowly start pushing more of the quantum simulation like encounters, probability volumes, commodity and retail goods, pricing and stock, resource persistence, no endless random chance to mine Haddonite in the same point, to the services allowing them to drive the gameplay in the various DGS. Let me stop right there. You guys
Dynamic game service.
Yeah. The thing that stuck out to me, I never gave consideration to, was this thing that he mentioned about tourists and entertainers and blue collar workers. You know, for those of you who played Star Wars Galaxies, it was great to have entertainers, but you know, we haven't thought about the fact that we've got bartenders, right? But we've also got the dance clubs, we've got the pool tables, we've got all these other things that could be NPC'd. That again, Chris doesn't put stuff in the game; and it's just there for decoration.
Well, I want to say something to that, guys. A while ago, I spoke with Pedro Camacho, and I talked with him briefly about some of the music in the game and complimented him accordingly. Right? It's amazing what he did with the music. But I mentioned we had this conversation about his music background, and he grew up. His dad, jazz. That was it for him. That was his bread and butter. And I said to him, it would be amazing for us to see, Pedro, have you do scores of music such as jazz in certain bars and areas of that nature to change the dynamic and the environment within game. You have that global music theme, such as ArtCorp. But to go to your local bar where you spawn from to hang out, and there's bands that play that music, or you hear music piping through. So yeah, it would be awesome to see that, and I kind of see that coming down the pipeline eventually when we have actual systems that we can gravitate to or be a part of.
That would be cool. Erris, you got any thoughts on this?
Long time ago.
In the galaxy far, far away?
Anyway. No, one of the things that CIG had talked about at one point wanting to do, and we've actually got a ship that's partially based on it, the Reliant. I can never remember which one's which, but the
Mako? The news van?
News van, right?
Yes.
But the idea that you could have news teams in verse doing live capture of stuff, and then that could be broadcast back to the bars, to TVs. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's just what I think about anytime I hear like entertainer or anything else in Star Citizen.
Yeah.
Jump right back to. There's going to be stuff for people to do. There will be.
I share that with you, Erris. That's a good point. I share that with you.
Colossal, any points on that?
No.
Okay.
You got it well covered.
All right, cool. All right, we'll roll with it. All right, here we go. Tony's goal, or his goal equals promise, he says, is to have elements of the dynamic universe start to come online next year. Some people ask, when is this supposed to happen? Likely towards the back half of the year, where players' actions can impact both the dynamic economy and other players. As far as server meshing being a prerequisite for Quantum, that is not the case. The server mesh is the optimization that will allow the universe to be dynamically broken up into individual islands, each of which is controlled by a DGS, allowing us to scale the concurrent player count inside a single unified reality beyond what an individual server could handle. How likely are you to run into pirates at a given location? What missions are being offered where and for how much? The distribution and quantity of valuable ores, and which shops are short on what goods and what they're willing to pay to procure more is what Quantum, not the DGS, simulates. Quantum is responsible for the big picture of the universe. Quantum is not dependent on the server mesh as it is as it's a level above the server mesh. But quantum is what allows the server mesh to reflect the dynamic state of the universe. That doesn't mean that quantum is a prerequisite for server meshing, though. It's just the universe won't be as dynamic without quantum driving it. In the same way, the iCache is not a prerequisite for quantum, but when online, it will allow more fidelity of object state and tracking in the quantum simulation. Also, if some of you haven't seen the AMA that was put out in April on quantum, it's worth checking it out. Okay, and that's basically where he stops at. Okay, so this has been the latest update that we've got from Chris. For people who ask about when is all this going to happen, when will it come into fruition? According to Chris, they are working on it, and they're talking about sometime in 2021 for the economy. Let me throw this question to all of you guys. Do you think this will be something that they will implement first in Stanton? And the reason why I'm saying that is because CIG has made it very clear that Stanton is the test bed before they start spreading into the universe. Do you think that they'll just do something as simple as, Microtech to Hurston, Hurston to ArcCorp? Give me some feedback. Kimmy, let me start with you on that one.
All right. And I'm going to segue from what Erris said, and I'm going to compile what Kelosal mentioned, and I'm going to bring it into what we just read. Check it out. So Erris, you mentioned the Mako, and we're getting that news feed. We're all in a bar, and all of a sudden we get this news feed that, hey, there's a big battle, and we see the footage and lay waste of everything. And I look over to Kelosal. I said, hey man, you got the Vulture ready to go? And we all jump in the Vulture or whatever salvage ship, go to that location where things have happened, and go ahead and start gathering the scrap. And basically what we're seeing is, with the advent of them possibly bringing out Pyro, and they said how, what area was that? Delamar? I get those two confused, but they're talking about putting it back into Nyx. So
Right.
There's what Chris said. They don't need server meshing to make that happen. So we can jump, or even just quantum jump for the time being, over to Pyro. So there we have that dynamic system happening where, those items are there, black boxes, metals, other goods that, as far as pirates raided the ships, you got cargo that's there. So we're going out in the Vulture and just gathering all this stuff, even capturing fuel, as Todd Pappy mentioned, and bringing it back and selling it off. So there you have it. We don't need the server meshing to happen, to be a thing, whereas the Quanta items are there, and it can tell us, go here, go there, because it's available right now.
Good point. Colossal?
Okay, so your question specifically, I want to make sure.
Well, Chris kind of enhanced on it a little bit more. First of all, talking about the quantum is not dependent upon, because most of us have thought that, server meshing and maybe iCache, all that stuff had to be all together before we would see it. And he's saying that Quanta actually is not dependent upon it. He said the universe will be better with it, but it's not waiting on it. And again, about it coming out possibly sometime after later next year.
Right, in Stanton. It'll be. I think it'll be pushed out in Stanton first. I mean, look at what they already are doing with Stanton, anyways. I know Stanton is the only system they have out, but you do have a planet or a moon that's supposed to be in the Pyro system, like Delamar. Right,
Yeah.
but they've already started the Mo Trader system. I mean, the Mo Trader money system in Stanton.
Right.
So I wouldn't see why they would start it anywhere else other than Stanton. I mean, they still have to put in the actual Crusader planet and things like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they added another system and just like Pyro and just started moving from Stanton to Pyro with that type of theory. But yeah, the groundwork's already in Stanton, and since you have the first implementation of the new trader system, like the Mo Trader or whatever you call it, I would consider this another addition to it. So yeah.
Okay. Erris?
So I'd have to go back and watch the beginning of the video more closely, because I was just listening to what was saying. I wasn't really listening. But I believe at the beginning they actually show like when they first turn the Quanta on in that system that they're using, they all come in from other systems, right? Which sort of tells me that, and in that same sort of system, they were able to watch all of the players be where they were, and those players, like, they were showing us more of the verse than just Stanton. So it makes me think that that system, yeah, it gathers where players are and knows where the players are, but it's running the simulation for the whole verse anyway. So it doesn't matter what systems we have when they turn it on. I believe they could actually just turn it on. And it would use Pyro and Stanton or whatever systems we have as part of it and just run the full simulation, and would only account for, I mean, we only account for 10%, right? So it'll run without us.
Yeah, that's a good point, because he did open up at the very beginning. He opened up talking about how many mining locations, shops, you know, he went through that. It was like a few hundred, you know what I mean? So even if it just started generating from there, and like you said, if Pyro gets introduced, obviously the gate you know, obviously going through the jump is another aspect of it. But there's enough consumer places. Now, what we haven't seen are when you talked about like the factories, the places that start to, we do have mining on planets, so you can see refineries coming, but that's the only thing that we haven't seen is the manufacturing locations, because we've got the shops and stores. So if we start seeing that pop into the game, then we kind of know that they're probably getting there. So, you know, I thought it was great what Chris shared. Again, the detail of how this thing is going to work, in the sense of how it drives the game. Kimmy, you talked about that again. The fact that this is constantly running. You know, I'm so used to when I shut down in the game, when I come back, I kind of pick up from where I left off at. But to come back and the world, or for lack of a better term, the universe has changed, you know, since I left, is going to mean something. Maybe when I go to sleep in my ship somewhere in space, God forbid I wake up and I'm in the middle of a battle that's surrounding me. You know, who knows what's going to happen, right? But it's nice to know that the universe is going to be dynamic. And again, I don't know very many games that are that. I mean, stuff does change in games, don't get me wrong, but this is pretty big to me in the sense of, especially with a 9-to-1 ratio. With a 9-to-1 ratio, the NPCs are tremendously impacting the universe, probably more than the human players are on an economy level. Okay,
It's almost spoof proof.
Yeah,
That's a word, term. Spoof proof.
Yeah. We got a couple questions that people have pumped in. Guys, thanks for hanging out with us. We know this was a pretty intense video, but for those of you who've hung out with us, we really appreciate the fact that you guys have been commenting and sharing your thoughts in relation to the economy and what Tony Z was sharing. We do have a couple questions that popped up. Parker GC8 asked, what do you guys like to do other than mining? Erris, let me throw that at you real quick. Other than mining, I'm not even sure if you're a miner, but if you are, what's the other thing that you enjoy doing in game?
I don't play.
Okay, that's cool.
I got no time.
Yeah.
I'll play an hour of a game.
Well, let's put it to you a different way then. What is it you are aspiring to do once you get the space and time to finally settle in? What's really got your attention about Star Citizen that you'd like to do?
I honestly don't even know anymore.
Okay.
It's expanded so much since I first had my. It's all going to depend on time. Travel times are.
Yes.
So, I mean, I want to do some mining. I want to do some exploration. I want to do some medic. I want to do just about everything. I want to try everything. But yeah, like Pickle Skin there says, kids will do that. Life changes. I don't. I have. Our Citizen started, and now kids.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Mine are 25 and 24, brother. So I'm finally free. But you'll get there eventually. But I understand, believe me. RL, and there is a time commitment to this game.
I'll be free in 24, 25 years, and Star Citizen will be coming out.
He says that now. Wait till his kid can play the game with him. He'll be on here real quick with his kid sitting on his lap playing the game. So you
have a guild in the making, Erris. You have a guild in the making. No worries.
Yeah. Kimmy, what about you? What is there anything in focus for you for the game that you're into? Because I know you do stuff in the Prospector, but is there anything in particular that you'd like to do other than mining?
Well, just as things come online, and I kind of set myself up. I don't have that package ship package or anything, or I'm that titled holder of these different types of ships. But I kind of want to approach it with the means of being versatile. Colossal mentioned that of just having that versatility in the
Mm-hmm.
game of having more than just one function in the game because
Mm-hmm.
you have to because of how things dynamically change and
Mm-hmm.
you want to be able to shift gears. But the other component to that, me as when I look at other people who play the game, you don't have to be stuck to one thing
Mm-hmm.
and or be that lone wolf in the game. You can partner up and work with other people if you need to change gears on different aspects of the career types in order to make your bottom line. So it's a good balance of being able to uh, have different ships
Mm-hmm.
or have relationships that you build out there in the verse to be able to accomplish your goals. So you're
Right.
not stuck. That's the beauty of this game. You're not boxed into one type of thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of if you introvert, this is a great way to be more outgoing in that
Mm-hmm.
sense that you can partner up with someone or meet someone out there, and all of a sudden this relationship builds. And that's the beauty of what Star Citizen reflects about this community. You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
That you come together, and all of a sudden you have this relationship with all. I didn't know these guys, and I want to crew up with these guys and do these different things.
Yeah.
And you know, you may have a different ship. Colossal has a different ship. Erris has a different ship. I have a different ship, and we can form together and make something happen to have a positive bottom line in our goals. So it's that dynamic. You're not boxed in with soul citizens, star
Star
citizens.
Citizen, yeah. No, but your point is real good because you can't have just one ship, right? You really
No,
can't just have one. I'm saying no. I'm saying
no,
you
you
can
cannot.
have no. That's not what I mean. I was going to say you can have one ship, but you also have, as you mentioned, if you're limited with ships, you can always
Yes,
crew up with somebody else. You
yes,
could that's your point.
yes,
That there's so much
yes,
flexibility there, so that you don't have to say,
yes.
well, all I want to do is this, and if I
Right,
can't do that, I can't make money. No, if you
right.
own nothing but an Aurora, I can ask you, dude, you're going to go out in your mole. Do you mind if can
Yes,
you hire me and I'll work with you? So you're right.
yeah.
That is a great aspect of the game. Good, very good point.
Probabilities. Yeah,
Very good point.
probabilities happen. So
Yep.
you could lose that one ship.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But you can still make money in some way or other. You find some way to do it.
Yes.
Colossal. What about you? What is it something that sticks in your head other than mining? Something you like doing?
Well, I love the fact that Kimmy mentioned versatility, and love the fact that he mentioned earlier we talked about group play and other things like teamwork and random happenings. Um, just to help out Eris, if he wanted to have something to do, he can go ahead and jump in that Apollo and scrap up those bodies that's going to be in those trade routes in the next couple of years. But but for me, Apollo Eris. But for me, I would go ahead and probably just do exploring. I'm fine with my Carrack, and I'm fine with having that merchantman on the side, so I can go ahead and stay out there. But I'm trying to. I wanted to answer that question, which I did, but I didn't. I was skeptical to answer that question because I wanted to make sure that whoever asked that question didn't have the intent of piracy out there when they saw Cobalt Paint.
Yep.
I hear you. I hear you. Okay. Let's see. Other than mining, I'm like Colossal to a bit degree. I'm big on support, so I'm the idea of being able to take out the medical ships to go help people. He mentioned earlier about even the NPCs that they would eject and put out a beacon to be picked up. I mean, that's the type of stuff I think is cool. On an org level or group level, I'm into doing bomber stuff. I'm not a combat fighter. That's not my big thing to do. But any type of support stuff, I love doing stuff like that. Um, Mike G123 asked the question. I don't get this, Mike, so if you're still here, kind of give me some clarity. Do you think Chris Roberts is part of the media? I live in LA and I've seen him in the based media. I don't know what that means. It's not clicking with me, so help me out there a little bit so I'll know what's going on. Um, and then Admiral Kusanagi says, do you feel energy weapons will be more commonplace than ballistic ammo since the prices could become an issue? Do you guys think that people will rely on energy weapons? That says that prices could become variably priced and
Yes,
Or you think, yeah.
yes, I would blow it up. Those of you guys with these size 9 torpedoes out there jumping on those what is it, retaliators? Yeah, I would jack up the price because those are the people out there that sit there hitting people with those size 9, hitting freaking auroras and stuff with size 9s. So yeah, I would definitely go ahead and jack up those prices, jack up the commodities, jack up the deposits. Well, I wouldn't jack up deposits, but those of you that are selling the resources to make that, jack it up and sell it to those people. They can pay for it.
Well, I will say this. I remember when the Polaris came out and they talked about, was the Polaris has size 10s? Is that right? Size 10s or size 12s on it, whatever it is. But the game price for those things is going to be no joke. I mean, you're going to be slapping the hand of the guy that's like your bomber guy, you know, who's going to be launching that stuff if he's just flagrantly launching them, because they're very expensive to replace. So I think there is some point here about, you know, we've talked about operating costs of ships before, right? And yeah, I mean, I think people are going to have to be really serious about when they take out these ballistics or these big torpedoes, how much, you know, are you going to be rapid firing them bad fellas? Or are you going to be counting them every time you launch one? And they tell you it's 50,000 credits per torpedo. That's no joke. It's no joke at all.
Yeah.
There was a question that Fast Cart, I'm not paying attention to Fast Cart with his crazy self. Fast Cart, you know we're on Audible and iTunes. You know we're on Audible and iTunes, so I'm not answering that question anyway. All right. Well, listen, we had a really great time today. A lot of good information. Nice to go back. Always good to hear Tony Z. And so we really appreciate everybody who hung out with us tonight, especially for the questions that you guys asked. Let's see. Let me go down the list here. Let me start with Erris. Anything you tell us where people can find you, where they can look you up, and anything else you want to share?
Yeah, you can find me over at Relay. Relay.sc or twitch.tv/relay_sc, or I don't know, a bunch of places, Discord and such. I mainly just do podcasts or two, Saturdays, Relay Station, Tuesdays, an unnamed game show where we talk about games other than Star Citizen, which is, I mean, there are other games. I know it sounds crazy, but
just a few. There are a few.
There are some, yeah. So, but yeah, that's me.
Yeah, you guys, Fastcart just put their link in. You guys make sure you hit Relay SC, even though they're not there right now. Click on them, follow them. And the reason why I'm saying it is not because Erris is here, even though he's here. I'm saying this because the guys at Relay are like what I call the legacy streamers. These are guys who have been around since the very beginning, and they have pushed through. There are a lot of good streamers that were around who are no longer around. They've just kind of petered out, or life has taken them elsewhere. But these guys have kind of held the torch for quite a while for us in Star Citizen, and we owe a lot to them, because you guys basically started out like a news reporting thing in the beginning. I mean, they were like the source of like turning on your local news and hearing what the latest is in Star Citizen, and they've been around doing that for quite a while. So make sure you guys follow them. Make sure you check them out.
Passion is real.
Check them out.
Transcripts at the beginning. Transcripts, because they'd have live shows, and then the only way to find out what they said was to watch a 2-hour show, and it was like,
wow,
well, no one does that, so we transcribed it all. But now CIG have started just summarizing what they're talking about, so we don't have to do it anymore. It's great. But yeah,
it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
thanks a lot, buddy, and thanks again for coming on tonight with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Give our love to the guys over there, to David and or to Snakara, and Shiver's already here, so you don't have to say anything to him, but you can say hi to everybody else.
I never do say anything to Shiver anymore.
Kelosal, tell everybody, say goodbye, whatever you want to say, or where can people find you?
It was a pleasure. You can find me around those crazily wonderful people of Test Squadron in Star Citizen. That's where you can find me at.
The school teacher who's always doing homework and trying to play the games at the same time. So, as always, good to have
Grading
you with us.
papers, yeah, at the same time we're playing Star Citizen. And trust me, I got my eye on you. I can do
And Kimmy, 65, tell people where they can find you.
Oh, definitely. That's where you're going to find me on Twitch at Kimmy65. And I'm streaming time to time and flying and getting into the game, talking about the game. So come on in, chill music, questions about the game. I'm there for you. So come on in.
Kimmy has the playlist of playlists going while he's doing his flying. Sometimes he's cruising over. I love when you're always cruising like over some moon or something, and it's like sunset or sunrise. You always seem to catch that kind of shot, and you have music playing while you're doing it. So
Yes.
you guys definitely check out Kimmy as well. And of course, thank you guys again for hanging out with us tonight. We need to figure out who we want to raid, and I did not even start looking. Usually I do that when you guys are talking, and I should have been on that. Yeah, also don't forget, you guys check us out. I don't know why this isn't changing. There we go. Don't forget, we have another show, Friday Night Live. And we do that on Friday nights, 11:30 Eastern Time, where we open up the microphone to you, our community. Admiral Kusanagi's been on plenty of times. We love when you guys come into the chat with us. And this isn't talking in the chat box. This is talking live with us in Discord. Where can you find me, Quinn? You find me right here. You'll find me here with Soul Citizens. Sometimes I'm behind the scenes doing the producing, but sometimes I'm on the camera too. But thanks for asking. I appreciate that. But yeah, you guys can, it's open mic. It is good, Heavy Bob. And we get some really good input and conversations going. Sometimes we have 5-6 people in the chat from the chat talking with us. And we just have a blast with you guys because you guys are such great intellectual, understanding people about Star Citizen. And so, yes, we want to invite you guys to come hang out with us when you guys get a chance. Let's see who we've got here that we can raid. Why don't we raid...
It'd be somebody playing Star Citizen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I think the one time I did it, though, I sent to somebody who was speaking Portuguese. That was not my intent. I wasn't paying attention to the language, so that didn't go over so well. But why don't we go to Captain Jib? We're going to go to Captain Jib.
Nice.
I hope I got it right. Doesn't look like I got it right. Did I get it right? Nope, I didn't get it right. The
Captain
raid
Jib
button didn't come up.
_ Captain _ Jib.
Jib, right? That's what I typed, and it didn't go through.
Uppercase C, uppercase J.
It's not digging it. I'm not typing it right.
This is why we at the relay station don't raid. It's because
I know why. I know why. Okay.
Because I haven't figured out how to do it yet. I've only been doing this for...
I got it. Unrecognized command. What do you mean unrecognized?
Uh-oh.
Okay. Oh my God. Thanks, guys, for the patience.
The /raid.
We finally got it going.
Okay.
All right. Thank
go.
you guys so much for hanging out with us. As always, we look for. Hopefully, you guys can make it on Friday. See us. If not, make sure you come see us next week. And as always, love, peace, and soul. You guys take care of yourselves. Be safe out there.